Welcome, and thank you for joining the Sleepy Scientist tonight. This channel is a place to let your thoughts slow down, your shoulders soften, and your mind gently wander as you drift towards sleep. Tonight's journey will take us into the quiet universe tucked neatly inside your skull, your brain. It's the command center of everything you think, feel, remember, and dream, and yet it works so silently you hardly ever notice it's there. Before we begin, I'd love to know where in the world you're listening from. Are you curled up somewhere cozy, or maybe drifting off in a faraway time zone? While you're here, please consider giving this video a like and subscribing to the channel. It helps more than you might think, and if you're already part of this sleepy little community, thank you. I'm truly glad you're here. Just be sure to tap the notification bell so you don't miss the next quiet voyage into science. I'll do my best not to make this video so fascinating that it keeps you wide awake. But if it does, at least you'll have some lovely new facts swirling through your mind as you drift off. So, here's a thought to hold as we start. How does a lump of soft, silent tissue somehow create the entire world you experience? Your brain is often described as the most complex object in the known universe. It's small enough to fit inside your hands, yet it holds more connections than there are stars in the Milky Way. Within that folded mass of pale pink tissue, over 86 billion neurons flicker with electrical whispers, weaving every memory, every dream, and every feeling you've ever known. It controls everything: your heartbeat, your breathing, your movements, your thoughts, your sense of time and space. It is the seat of your consciousness, the place where you, in some mysterious way, exist. And yet, despite being the source of every thought you've ever had, it remains a mystery to itself. This video will be our slow journey through that mystery. We'll wander carefully through its many hidden chambers, from the smallest sparks of its cells to the vast networks that shape your personality, your memories, and your sense of reality. We'll explore how it sleeps, how it dreams, and how it somehow turns electrical pulses into imagination, emotion, and awareness. Think of this as a quiet stroll through the universe within your head. There's no rush and no need to remember it all. Just let the story wash gently over you, and see where your mind drifts as we begin. And just a quick note, this video is intended for educational and relaxing purposes only, and should not be taken as medical advice. It is not a substitute for professional diagnosis, treatment, or care. If you have any concerns about your brain or overall health, please seek guidance from a qualified healthcare professional. Inside the quiet cradle of your skull rests a world so astonishingly complex that it defies easy description. It weighs barely more than a small bag of flour, yet it is the source of every laugh, every memory, every thought, and every dream you have ever had. This 3-pound organ, the human brain, may be the most intricate structure the universe has ever produced, and it is sitting silently between your ears as you listen. It's easy to forget that the brain is, at its core, part of your body. It is soft, fragile, and remarkably well protected, sealed inside a vault of bone, cushioned by fluid, and wrapped in 3 delicate membranes called the meninges. To the naked eye, it might seem unassuming, a pale pink landscape of folds and grooves, like the surface of some alien world. Yet those folds are the secret to its brilliance. By crumpling its outer layer into tight ridges and valleys, the brain fits an astonishing amount of thinking tissue into a small space, the way a map folds an entire country into a single sheet of paper. Beneath its gentle appearance is staggering complexity. The brain is made up of around 86 billion neurons, tiny, excitable cells that send messages with lightning speed. If each neuron were a person, they could fill the entire population of the Earth more than 10 times over. These neurons are linked by an almost unimaginable number of connections called synapses. Estimates suggest there are more than 100 trillion of them. That is a number so large that if you tried to count each synapse aloud, 1 per second, it would take you over 3 million years to finish. This dense forest of connections is alive with activity. At any given moment, electrical impulses are racing through your brain at speeds of up to 250 miles per hour. Every flicker of thought, every burst of emotion is the result of tiny pulses of electricity leaping across microscopic gaps, like fireflies flashing on a summer night. And yet, you never hear it. The loudest storm of activity in the known universe happens in perfect silence. Despite making up only about 2% of your body's weight, The brain is astonishingly greedy. It consumes around 20% of the energy your body produces. Most of that energy goes not into thinking grand thoughts or solving complex puzzles, but simply into keeping the neurons alive and ready. Even when you are daydreaming or drifting near sleep, your brain hums with activity, so much so that if it were a light bulb, it would be glowing faintly all the time. To put its scale in perspective, picture the Milky Way galaxy spread across the night sky, with its hundreds of billions of stars scattered in a spiral of shimmering light. Now imagine that, tucked inside your skull is a network with a similar number of individual components. Only these are not cold, distant suns, but living cells constantly speaking to each other, shifting, adapting, and reshaping themselves moment by moment. It is as if you carry a galaxy inside your head, and it is made of thought instead of starlight. What makes this even more extraordinary is how the brain builds itself. Each of us begins as a single cell, a speck smaller than a grain of sand. Over the course of 9 months, that cell divides and folds and grows into a complete nervous system. Billions upon billions of neurons form, migrate to the correct places, and wire themselves together in elaborate patterns, all without conscious direction. By the time you're born, the structure of your brain is already astonishingly intricate, and yet it will continue to transform throughout your life. Unlike most of the organs in your body, which largely maintain their form once built, the brain is in constant motion. It is plastic, reshaping its connections as you learn new skills, adapt to new surroundings, or recover from injury. This ability is called neuroplasticity, and it means that the brain is not a static machine but a living, changing ecosystem. In many ways, it resembles a rainforest more than a circuit board, dense, tangled, self-sustaining, and quietly alive. If you were to touch the surface of the brain, you would find it surprisingly soft, almost like firm jelly. It has no pain receptors of its own, which is why brain surgery can sometimes be done on awake patients. And yet this soft, silent tissue somehow contains everything that makes you who you are. Your personality, your memories, your fears, your hopes. They are not floating somewhere above you like an invisible cloud. They are etched into the physical tissue of this organ, patterns of connection sculpted by time and experience. Even when you are perfectly still, your brain is bustling like a city at night. Different regions glow with activity, sending signals back and forth along highways of white matter. There are control centers that manage movement, sensory stations that decode sound and sight, and vast networks that hum quietly in the background, piecing together your sense of self. If all the neurons in your brain were to fire at once, the energy would be enough to power a small light bulb, and yet the result would not be light, but the sudden bloom of a thought. Scientists have tried for centuries to compare the brain to the greatest technologies of their age: clocks, steam engines, telegraphs, computers. But all of these comparisons fall short. The brain is not simply a machine that processes information. It is something stranger and more fluid, a place where biology and experience blur together. Each moment, it integrates signals from the outside world with memories from the past and predictions about the future, crafting a seamless experience of reality. In a very real way, what you call the world is something your brain is constantly building inside itself. It can be humbling to realize that everything you perceive, the stars in the sky, the sound of the wind, the feeling of your own heartbeat, is not experienced directly, but as electrical patterns interpreted by the cells inside your head. You never touch the outside world itself. You touch the version your brain makes for you. That version is astonishingly detailed and usually very accurate, but it is still just a construction. It is the most elaborate illusion ever performed, and you are both the audience and the magician. Perhaps the strangest part is how little you notice it working. The brain does not ask for your attention. It does not blink lights or buzz like a machine. It just hums quietly in the background, orchestrating the entire symphony of your life while pretending not to be there. It is, in its way, the most self-effacing of organs, content to give you the experience of being you without demanding credit for the performance. Somewhere deep inside that soft labyrinth of cells, sparks of electricity and threads of chemistry have come together to produce something that can fall in love, write music, solve puzzles, and wonder about the nature of existence. That such a thing exists at all may be one of the most improbable facts in the cosmos. And the most astonishing part is this. You are carrying it quietly inside your skull, every second of your life, as if it were the most ordinary thing in the world. If you could zoom far enough into the brain to see its smallest parts, you would find yourself in a dense, tangled forest of living threads. These are neurons, the brain's fundamental building blocks. Tiny living wires that flash with electricity and pass whispers from one to another at extraordinary speed. Each neuron is like a miniature tree, with long root-like branches reaching out to gather information, and a single cable-like trunk that carries signals away. And there are not just a handful of these trees. There are about 86 billion of them, packed so tightly that a grain of brain tissue the size of a grain of sand contains more neurons than there are people in New York City. A single neuron may seem small and lonely, but it is never truly alone. Each one can connect to thousands of other neurons, forming a mesh of connections so intricate that it makes even the busiest city skyline look sparse. The points where they meet are called synapses, microscopic gaps where one neuron ends and the next begins. Signals don't leap the gap as tiny sparks of fire, as they are often imagined, but as carefully timed chemical messengers called neurotransmitters. When a neuron decides to send a message, it generates a quick burst of electricity called an action potential. This travels down the neuron's axon, the long cable-like part, like a wave of dominoes falling in perfect order. When the wave reaches the end of the neuron, it triggers the release of neurotransmitters into the synapse. These molecules drift across the narrow space and bind to the next neuron, opening tiny gates that let in ions, sparking a new electrical wave. It is a dazzling relay race that happens millions of times every second, a silent ballet of electricity and chemistry dancing in perfect rhythm. There are many different neurotransmitters, each with their own subtle personality. Glutamate excites neurons, encouraging them to fire and keeping your brain awake and alert. GABA calms them down, soothing the network into restful silence. Dopamine delivers a jolt of motivation, nudging you toward things that feel rewarding. Serotonin lifts and balances your mood, while acetylcholine sharpens your focus like a quiet internal spotlight. These chemicals are tiny, but their influence is vast. A few molecules drifting between cells can be the difference between calm and panic, or between boredom and fascination. Neurons are glamorous in the world of brain science. They get the headlines, the illustrations, the glowing animations in documentaries. But neurons could not do their work without an entire hidden workforce of supporting cells quietly keeping them alive and functional. These are the glial cells, and they are in many ways the brain's unsung heroes. There are roughly the same number of glial cells as there are neurons, possibly even more. Their name comes from the Greek word for glue, which is a little unfair because they do far more than simply hold the brain together. Some glia, called astrocytes, sprawl out in star-shaped patterns and wrap around neurons like cosmic caretakers. They feed the neurons, mop up stray neurotransmitters, and keep the chemical environment perfectly balanced. If the brain were a city, astrocytes would be the tireless street sweepers and maintenance crews, silently making sure everything keeps running. Other glia, called oligodendrocytes, act like skilled electricians. They wrap axons in a fatty coating called myelin, which works like insulation on a wire. Myelin lets electrical impulses travel faster, much faster in fact. A signal on a myelinated axon can shoot along at well over 200 miles per hour, while an unmyelinated one plods along at just a few miles per hour. Without these microscopic insulation specialists, your thoughts would crawl instead of race. Then there are the microglia, the smallest of the glial family, and arguably the most dramatic. They patrol the brain like tiny immune system guardians, searching for damaged cells, stray debris or lurking invaders. When they find trouble, they can engulf and digest it, like vigilant microscopic janitors with a flair for the dramatic. If neurons are the stars of the show, microglia are the night watch, quiet, watchful and ready to swoop in the moment something goes wrong. All of these glial cells go about their work without complaint or applause. They don't generate thoughts or compose symphonies, but without them, the neurons could not survive long enough to do anything at all. They are the quiet scaffolding holding up the cathedral of the mind. It is easy to overlook them, but perhaps they like it that way. The brain's housekeeping staff, content to keep the world's most important organ humming smoothly, while the neurons soak up the spotlight. If you could shrink yourself down and wander through this microscopic city, you would see an endless skyline of neurons glowing softly with electrical pulses, their branches stretching and intertwining like luminous coral. Between them, glial cells would glide silently, polishing, repairing, insulating, sweeping. There would be no sound except for the faint crackle of signals flashing from cell to cell, and yet this quiet choreography is what allows every word, every song, and every thought you have ever known. Each neuron is unique. Some are tiny and round, barely the width of a human hair, while others, like the pyramidal cells in the cortex, have long, branching arms that reach out like trees in a rainforest. The longest neurons can stretch astonishing distances. The ones that run from your spinal cord down to your toes can be over 3 feet long. Imagine a single cell running nearly the length of your body, silently transmitting electrical signals in a fraction of a second. The scale of it is both humbling and surreal. These neurons are not static. They are always changing, sprouting new connections, trimming old ones, and strengthening the pathways you use most often. Every skill you learn, every habit you form, even every memory you store leaves a faint physical imprint on this network. The architecture of your thoughts is written into the structure of your brain, sculpted by experience and refined by time, yet none of it would last more than a few minutes without the tireless labour of the glia. They bring nutrients, clear away waste, and repair damage, often without pause. It is tempting to think of neurons as the actors on the stage, but without glia running the lighting, cleaning the floors, sewing the costumes, and stopping the ceiling from caving in, there would be no performance at all. The brain's drama is a team effort, and half the cast is made of quiet background characters who never forget their lines. It is strange to realise that everything you are, your memories, your hopes, your sense of self, depends on the microscopic harmony of these cells. Tiny bursts of electricity leaping across invisible gaps, whispering chemicals drifting like messages in bottles, housekeeping cells patrolling the space between, sweeping up the confetti after each passing thought. The entire orchestra of your mind relies on this hidden duet. Neurons to play the music, glia to keep the lights on. All of it happens without your awareness. While you walk, talk, dream, or even while you sleep, the neurons and glia carry on their silent dance, sustaining the illusion of being you. It is a delicate miracle, this collaboration of thinking cells and their tireless caretakers, and the most curious part of all is that this dazzling, intricate performance has been happening your entire life, right under your nose, and you have never heard a sound. If you could gently lift the brain from its bony shelter and see it as a whole, you might be struck first by its elegance. It is soft and pale, shaped like an oversized walnut, and covered in delicate folds and grooves that look as though they were sculpted by slow ocean currents. This outer landscape is not random decoration. Every fold, every crease, is there to maximize the brain's surface area, packing as much thinking tissue as possible into the small space inside your skull. Within this intricate landscape lie distinct regions, each quietly devoted to its own essential role. The largest and most commanding of these is the cerebrum. It takes up nearly 80% of the brain's total volume and is what gives the brain its characteristic wrinkled appearance. The cerebrum is the home of your higher thinking. Everything from solving puzzles to appreciating music to daydreaming about what you might eat for lunch. It is divided down the middle by a deep groove into two halves, the left and right hemispheres, which are like mirror twins with subtle differences in personality. The left hemisphere is often portrayed as logical, analytical, and precise. It tends to handle language, mathematics, and step-by-step reasoning. The right hemisphere is seen as creative, intuitive, and holistic, more concerned with patterns, spatial awareness, and the broader emotional tone of things. In truth, the two sides work together constantly, connected by a thick bridge of nerve fibers called the corpus callosum, which allows them to swap information at high speed. It is less like having two separate brains and more like having two dance partners who always move in sync, one leading while the other improvises. If you look more closely at the surface of the cerebrum, you can see that it is divided into 4 main lobes on each side, like quiet districts in a bustling city. The frontal lobes lie at the front behind your forehead. These are the decision makers and planners, the places where you weigh options, imagine the future, and choose your next move. They are also responsible for voluntary movement, controlling the muscles of your body with astonishing precision. Just behind them sit the parietal lobes, which process sensory information from your skin and body. They help you know where your limbs are, feel textures, and navigate the space around you without bumping into the furniture. Further back are the occipital lobes, nestled at the rear of the brain like a pair of quiet observatories. They are dedicated almost entirely to vision, decoding patterns of light into shapes, colours, and motion. Whenever you look at the night sky or watch leaves fluttering in the wind, these lobes are quietly transforming raw photons into vivid images. Tucked just above your ears are the temporal lobes, which handle sound, language, and memory. They store the voices of people you love and the lyrics of songs you have not heard in years, waiting to play them back at a moment's notice. Beneath the cerebrum, cradled like a small hidden pearl, is the cerebellum. Its name means little brain, and while it may be smaller than the cerebrum, it is no less remarkable. The cerebellum coordinates your movements with exquisite accuracy. Every time you reach for a cup, walk down a staircase, or catch a falling pen before it hits the floor, the cerebellum is timing each muscle's contraction to the millisecond. It also fine-tunes your balance, helping you stay upright even when your surroundings are shifting. Without it, simple actions would become clumsy and unpredictable, like trying to play the piano while wearing oven mitts. Then there is the brainstem, the oldest and most fundamental part of the brain, tucked at its base where it meets the spinal cord. The brainstem is small and often overlooked, yet it keeps you alive moment by moment. It controls your breathing, your heartbeat, your blood pressure, and the reflexes that keep you swallowing, blinking, and sleeping. Unlike the higher regions that can take a coffee break while you nap, the brainstem never rests. It is the tireless heartbeat of the entire system, quietly pulsing away while the rest of your mind drifts. The brainstem is made of three main parts. The midbrain acts as a relay station, routing sensory signals to where they need to go, and controlling basic movements of the eyes. The pons, a rounded bulge just below, helps coordinate movement between the left and right sides of your body, and plays a key role in sleep. And the medulla oblongata, at the very base, is the keeper of your vital functions. If the brain were a grand cathedral, the medulla would be the old stone foundation, bearing the weight of everything above without fanfare or complaint. Threaded throughout all these structures is an astonishing web of white matter, bundles of nerve fibers that connect distant regions like high-speed highways. These pathways allow information to travel from one lobe to another, from the cerebellum to the cerebrum, and from the brainstem out to the body. In a way, the brain is less a single organ and more an entire city of specialized neighborhoods connected by glowing, lightning-fast transit lines. Messages flash through this network at speeds that can exceed 250 miles per hour, allowing the various regions to collaborate almost instantly. What makes this architecture even more remarkable is how seamlessly it all works together. The frontal lobes may be busy planning your future, while the occipital lobes decode the flicker of sunlight through a window. The temporal lobes recall the lyrics of a familiar song, and the cerebellum keeps you balanced in your chair. Each part has its own quiet specialty, yet they blend their efforts so perfectly that you rarely notice the division of labour. To you, it simply feels like being one whole person. But beneath that smooth experience, billions of cells are working in beautifully coordinated silence. Even the texture of the brain reflects this division of labour. The wrinkled surface is called grey matter, named for its darker colour in preserved specimens. This is where most of the neuron cell bodies live, packed together in dense layers. Deeper inside lies the white matter, paler because of the myelin that insulates its axons. If the grey matter is the thinking surface of the brain, the white matter is its vast internal wiring, carrying thoughts to and from distant corners like unseen phone lines humming beneath the city. Each hemisphere of the cerebrum controls the opposite side of the body, a curious arrangement that means your right hemisphere guides your left hand and your left hemisphere guides your right. No one is entirely sure why evolution chose this cross-wiring, but it has been this way in humans for hundreds of thousands of years, and the system works so flawlessly that you never notice it. It is just one of countless little quirks in the brain's design. Strange on paper, seamless in practice. Walking through the brain structure is like exploring a world built for silence. There are no gears clanking or lights flashing, only the faint crackle of electrical signals darting through folded valleys and hidden passageways. From the lofty ridges of the cerebrum down to the quiet depths of the brainstem, every part has its role, and every role is essential. This soft, intricate landscape does not just hold your thoughts, it shapes them, guides them, and weaves them together into the single experience you call being alive. At first glance, the brain might seem like a collection of parts, each quietly minding its own business. But its true magic lies not in its individual pieces, but in the way they talk to one another. Billions of neurons, each with their own shape and purpose, form vast interconnected networks, living webs that spark with communication. These networks are not static. They shift and reshape constantly, strengthening some connections, pruning away others, and forming new links as you experience the world. In this way, your brain is less like a machine with fixed wiring, and more like a glowing city seen from above, forever building new streets and rerouting old ones as the landscape changes. Each neuron is a tiny electrical being, but it is only through connection that it comes alive. Neurons reach out long tendrils called axons, which can stretch extraordinary distances, and they extend bushy branches called dendrites to receive incoming messages. When two neurons meet, they rarely touch directly. Instead, they pause just short of one another at a microscopic gap called a synapse, where their communication becomes something halfway between electricity and chemistry. When a neuron fires, it sends a small electrical impulse called an action potential racing down its axon. This signal is like a brief lightning bolt, triggered when the electrical charge inside the neuron suddenly flips from negative to positive. As it reaches the end of the axon, it prompts tiny packets of neurotransmitter chemicals to burst open and spill their contents into the synapse. These molecules drift across the gap and lock onto receptors on the neighbouring neuron, opening little channels that let charged particles rush in. This changes the neighbour's electrical state, and if enough of these signals arrive together, the neighbour will fire its own impulse down its axon, passing the message along. It is a relay of breathtaking speed and scale. These bursts of electricity can travel down an axon at over 200 miles per hour, and this happens not once or twice, but trillions of times every second. There are about 100 trillion synapses in the human brain, and each one is like a tiny decision gate, weighing whether to pass a signal on or quietly ignore it. Together, these gates form intricate patterns of activity, flowing rivers of electrical pulses that flicker and merge like the lights of a vast metropolis. As neurons communicate, they do not do so at random. They form communities, clusters of cells that fire together, strengthening their mutual connections through a principle famously summed up as cells that fire together, wire together. When you learn something new, certain neurons begin to fire in coordinated patterns. Over time, their connections grow stronger and more efficient, until what was once a shaky, unfamiliar pathway becomes a smooth, well-paved highway. This is how a pianist's fingers find the keys without thinking, or how you can recall a familiar route home without pausing to wonder which turn comes next. These networks are not rigid blueprints. They are living structures, constantly updated by experience. Neurons that are rarely used may gradually withdraw their connections, like quiet back alleys fading from the map. Neurons that are heavily used may branch and strengthen, sprouting new synapses as if building extra lanes on a busy road. This ceaseless remodeling means your brain is never exactly the same from one moment to the next. Each thought subtly reshapes the landscape through which it travels. All this frantic activity somehow gives rise to something strangely serene, the rhythms of the brain. Beneath the chaos of individual signals, neurons often synchronize their firing, creating waves of electrical activity that ripple across large regions. These brainwaves can be measured as patterns of oscillating voltage, and they come in different frequencies, each linked to different mental states. When you're deeply relaxed but still awake, your brain tends to hum with alpha waves, slow, steady oscillations like a calm tide washing back and forth. In moments of alert focus or mental effort, faster beta waves take over like the quick chatter of a lively crowd. When you drift into the first stages of sleep, slower theta waves begin to roll through, dreamy and soft, and when you sink into the deepest stages of slumber, your brain shifts to the slow, towering peaks of delta waves, each one like a deep, distant drumbeat. Even during rapid eye movement sleep, when you dream most vividly, your brain bursts into fast, irregular rhythms that resemble waking activity, as though the city is lit up again for a secret midnight festival. These rhythms are not mere background noise. They help organize the brain's traffic, coordinating the timing of signals so that different regions can communicate efficiently. It is a bit like the synchronization of traffic lights in a city. Without timing, cars would jam every intersection, but with it they flow smoothly in waves. Brainwaves are the hidden tempo of your thoughts, setting the pace for attention, perception, and memory to weave together. If you could float above this landscape the way astronauts look down at Earth at night, the sight would be mesmerizing. You would see vast networks flickering on and off in shimmering constellations. Bursts of activity would bloom in one region, ripple outward, and fade, while others sparkle to life somewhere else. Bright highways of white matter would flash with messages, while quiet neighborhoods pulse gently in synchrony, their rhythms rising and falling like breathing. Even when you are still, this neural city never truly sleeps. Some networks handle sensory information, sorting and labeling every sight, sound, and touch. Others manage movement, primed to coordinate your muscles the instant you decide to act. Still others link together memory, language, and emotion, tying your past and present into a seamless sense of self. These networks are not isolated, but interwoven, forming loops of activity that can spread across the entire brain in less than a second. What makes this even more astonishing is how little you notice it happening. The brain's electrical storms are silent. There are no sparks flying from your ears, no glow seeping through your skull. All this dazzling energy is contained, miniature lightning storms flashing away in total darkness. The only hint of their presence is the quiet hum of thought itself, the stream of inner words, images, and feelings that seem to appear out of nowhere. It is easy to imagine the brain as something solid and mechanical, like the circuit board inside a computer. But the truth is far stranger. Neural networks are alive. They grow, branch, and compete. They shift allegiances, reorganize their boundaries, and merge into new patterns. In the span of a single breath, countless connections are strengthening, weakening, or vanishing altogether. This is not the fixed wiring of a machine, but the dynamic, shimmering web of a living mind. And yet, out of this restless dance comes the illusion of stability. You feel like the same person from one day to the next, even though your networks are subtly rearranging themselves all the time. Your brain is like that city at night, ever-changing yet somehow constant, its lights winking on and off while the streets below remain familiar. Beneath the calm surface of your thoughts lies a restless, glowing cosmos, a network of living filaments forever sparking, reshaping, and illuminating the darkness from within. Every moment of your life, waves of information are streaming into your brain from the world around you. Light strikes your eyes, air vibrations tickle the hair cells in your ears, tiny molecules waft into your nose, pressure presses against your skin. Yet none of these things are sensations until your brain interprets them. On their own, they are just signals, raw data with no meaning. Your brain's remarkable talent is transforming these scattered fragments into the seamless experience you call reality. Take vision, for example. When you open your eyes, it feels as if you see the world instantly and completely, as though it simply pours into your mind like water filling a glass. But what actually reaches your eyes is only light, bouncing off objects and entering through the pupils. This light lands on the retina at the back of your eyes, where it is absorbed by specialized cells called photoreceptors. These cells don't see colors or shapes. They merely react to photons, converting their energy into tiny electrical signals. These signals are then passed to other cells in the retina, which begin the first rough processing, sharpening edges, detecting movement, highlighting contrasts. The information leaves the eye through the optic nerve, which is like a thick cable carrying millions of tiny wires. It travels back into the brain and eventually arrives at the visual cortex, a sheet of tissue at the back of the brain in the occipital lobe. Here the raw signals are unpacked, sorted, and reconstructed. One set of neurons detects lines and edges, another identifies motion, another recognizes colors. These features are sent on to higher visual areas, where they are stitched together into coherent shapes. Only then do they merge with memory, allowing you to recognize a friend's face, or read a word, or notice that the sky has turned the pale blue of morning. What feels like instant sight is actually a complex collaboration of billions of neurons working in perfect synchrony, quietly building a picture for your mind to see. Hearing is just as intricate, though it happens with astonishing speed. When sound enters your ears, it vibrates the eardrum and a chain of 3 tiny bones, the smallest bones in your body, each no bigger than a grain of rice. These bones amplify the vibrations and pass them into the cochlea, a spiral-shaped structure in the inner ear filled with fluid and lined with thousands of delicate hair cells. Different hair cells respond to different frequencies, so a high note might activate one region, while a deep bass note vibrates another. These mechanical ripples are converted into electrical impulses that travel along the auditory nerve to the brainstem, then onto the auditory cortex in the temporal lobes. There, the brain dissects the sounds into their components: pitch, loudness, rhythm, location, and then recombines them into something meaningful. It can identify a friend's voice in a noisy room or distinguish a bird's song from the hiss of the wind. Even your sense of where a sound is coming from relies on delicate timing differences between your two ears, measured in tiny fractions of a millisecond. In this way, the brain turns invisible air vibrations into the rich landscape of sound that surrounds you. Smell works on a smaller, more intimate scale. When you breathe in, drifting molecules of scent land on a thin layer of tissue high inside your nasal cavity. This tissue holds millions of olfactory receptor neurons, each tuned to particular shapes of molecules. When a molecule fits into a receptor, like a key into a lock, it triggers an electrical signal that travels directly to the olfactory bulbs, which sit just beneath the front of the brain. From there, the signals go straight to areas involved in memory and emotion, bypassing the usual sensory relay station called the thalamus. This is why smells can seem to open trapdoors in your mind, releasing vivid memories from years ago: a childhood kitchen, a loved one's perfume, the scent of rain on dry pavement. Smell is the oldest sense in evolutionary terms, and it still retains that ancient emotional power. It can conjure entire worlds from just a wisp of invisible chemistry. Touch might seem simpler, but it's equally sophisticated. Your skin is dotted with millions of sensory receptors that detect pressure, temperature, vibration, and pain. When you brush your fingers across a surface, these receptors send signals through nerves that climb up your spinal cord and into the brain, arriving at the somatosensory cortex along the ridge of the parietal lobes. This strip of tissue is mapped like a tiny upside-down person stretched across your brain. Your toes are represented near the top, your face near the bottom, and every patch of skin in between has its own dedicated neighborhood. The somatosensory cortex can tell you not just where you are touched, but how hard, how warm, and how textured the surface is. It can detect the whisper of a feather or the sharp edge of broken glass, sometimes in less than 1/10 of a second. All of this happens so swiftly and effortlessly that you rarely stop to marvel at it, yet it is one of the brain's most astonishing feats, constructing a living map of your body from an endless cascade of nerve impulses. Taste adds its own notes to this sensory orchestra. Molecules from food dissolve in your saliva and land on taste buds scattered across your tongue. Each taste bud contains dozens of receptor cells that respond to 5 basic flavors: sweet, salty, sour, bitter, and umami, which is the savory taste of proteins. Signals from these cells travel to the gustatory cortex, where they are combined with smell, texture, and even visual cues to create the experience of flavor. Most of what you call taste is actually smell arriving through the back of your throat to join the party, which is why food seems strangely flat when you have a blocked nose. Each sense has its own specialized gateway, yet none of them work in isolation. The brain is constantly weaving their signals together, cross-checking and combining them into a unified model of the world. When you see someone speaking, your brain matches the movement of their lips with the sound of their voice, linking them into a single event. When you bite into an apple, you see its color, hear its crunch, feel its crispness, and taste its sweetness all at once, even though these sensations are processed in far-flung corners of your brain. This seamless blending is so convincing that it can be hard to remember it is even happening. You feel as though you are directly experiencing reality, when in truth you're experiencing a careful simulation created inside your head. Every sound, sight, scent, and touch is translated into the same universal language of electrical pulses, then stitched together with memories, expectations, and guesses about what should come next. It is an elegant illusion. The world you think you see is not the raw world itself, but a construction, a constantly updated internal model. The brain takes scattered pieces of information, fills in gaps, smooths over inconsistencies, and presents the result to your consciousness as a single flowing moment. It is as if a painter were endlessly touching up a canvas while you watched, adding details faster than you could notice. And yet, for all this behind-the-scenes effort, it feels effortless. You do not have to remind yourself to interpret light as shapes or air vibrations as music. Your brain simply does it, quietly and flawlessly, moment after moment. It is a master illusionist that never takes a bow, content to let you believe that the world is just there, when in truth, the world you experience exists entirely within the soft folds of your own mind. Every movement you make, no matter how small, is the result of a silent symphony playing inside your head. You might not think about it when you lift a cup, tap your fingers to a rhythm, or stroll across a room, but each of these actions requires an intricate ballet of timing and precision. Muscles must contract in just the right order and with just the right force, while others relax at the perfect moment to stay out of the way. Somehow, this choreography happens so seamlessly that it feels effortless. But behind the curtain, your brain is conducting one of the most complex performances in the natural world. At the center of this performance is the motor cortex, a strip of brain tissue running across the top of your head from ear to ear like a silent crown. This region holds a map of your entire body, laid out in a curious and distorted pattern known as the motor homunculus. The hands, face, and tongue occupy enormous amounts of space, because their movements require extraordinary precision, while areas like the back or thighs are granted smaller territories. When you decide to move, neurons in the motor cortex send signals down long axons through the spinal cord, branching out to motor neurons that control your muscles. These signals travel with astonishing speed, in some cases faster than 200 miles per hour, and they do not just say, move. They carry exquisitely detailed instructions about how far, how fast, and how much force to use. To pick up a glass of water without spilling it, your brain must calculate the weight of the glass, the distance to reach, the grip strength needed, and the timing to lift and tilt it all in one smooth motion. You do this so automatically that you might not even notice, but each simple act is a masterpiece of fine-tuned control. Supporting this effort behind the scenes is the cerebellum, the small, tightly folded structure nestled at the back of your brain beneath the cerebrum. Though it makes up only about 10% of your brain's volume, it holds more than half of all your neurons. The cerebellum is the great coordinator, the quiet stage manager of movement. It receives a constant stream of sensory information from your muscles, joints, inner ears, and eyes, comparing your intended movement to what is actually happening in real time. If something is off, if your foot slips slightly, or your hand wobbles as you reach, the cerebellum sends rapid corrections to keep you on course. This happens with such subtlety and speed that you rarely notice it. When you walk across uneven ground, the cerebellum is making hundreds of tiny adjustments every second, tweaking the tension in your legs, adjusting the swing of your arms, even tilting your head minutely to keep your balance. It is as if you have an invisible acrobat living inside your skull, forever keeping you upright while pretending not to be there. The cerebellum also contributes to the smooth timing of complex actions. When you play a musical instrument, throw a ball, or dance to music, it helps coordinate the sequence of muscle contractions so they flow together in harmony. Without it, even simple actions would become jerky and disorganized, like a puppet with tangled strings. People with damage to the cerebellum can still move their muscles, but their movements lose their grace and precision, revealing just how much invisible work this structure does. The motor cortex and cerebellum do not work in isolation. They are part of a larger network that includes the basal ganglia, deep clusters of neurons that help initiate and smooth movements, and the premotor and supplementary motor areas, which plan and rehearse actions before you make them. Together, they transform your intentions into carefully timed electrical pulses that cascade through your nervous system, activating just the right muscles at just the right moments. Even something as simple as standing still is more active than it seems. Your body is never truly motionless. Tiny muscles are constantly contracting and releasing to keep you upright. The brain is reading signals from the soles of your feet, the stretch in your calves, the tilt of your head, and the swirl of fluid in your inner ears. It adjusts your posture with subtle shifts you never consciously feel. You may appear still to an observer, but from the inside it is more like balancing on the deck of a gently rocking ship. When you move more deliberately, this coordination becomes even more astonishing. Imagine reaching out to catch a falling object. Your eyes track its motion, sending updates to the visual cortex, which relays the information to the motor areas. The motor cortex calculates how far and how fast you must reach, while the cerebellum predicts where the object will be by the time your hand arrives. Your muscles fire in precisely timed waves, and within a fraction of a second the object is safely in your grasp. The entire event happens so quickly that it feels like instinct, but it is the result of lightning-fast communication between dozens of brain regions working as one. These systems even adapt as you practice. The first time you try a new skill, like learning to ride a bicycle, your movements are awkward and clumsy because your brain's circuits have not yet formed smooth patterns. With repetition, the motor cortex refines its signals and the cerebellum fine-tunes the timing, gradually turning conscious effort into automatic flow. Eventually, you can pedal without thinking about balance, steering, or the rhythm of your legs. The brain has converted a chaotic flurry of signals into a graceful, almost effortless routine. Movement also depends on feedback, and this is where the brain's design becomes truly elegant. Every time you move, sensory signals rush back to the brain, telling it how the movement is progressing. If you close your eyes and touch your nose, you can do it accurately because your brain is monitoring the position of your arm through proprioception, an internal sense of body position. This feedback loop allows the brain to constantly adjust and correct, like a conductor who not only waves the baton but also listens to the music as it plays. Perhaps the most remarkable part of this entire system is how invisible it is to your conscious mind. You do not have to tell each muscle what to do, or time each movement like a choreographer marking steps on a stage. You simply decide and your brain handles the countless details on your behalf. The signals leap through your nervous system like silent lightning. Muscles obey, balance holds, and the motion happens as if by magic. Yet if you pause for just a moment and pay attention to something as simple as lifting your hand, you can almost catch a glimpse of the orchestra behind the curtain. The decision begins as a spark in the motor cortex. Signals ripple outward, through the spinal cord and into your arm, while the cerebellum checks that everything is unfolding as planned. Your fingers rise smoothly into the air, and the moment you notice, it is already done. Every gesture, every step, every flick of a finger is built from this intricate dance of planning, timing, and correction. The brain is not simply commanding your muscles like a drill sergeant, it is more like a silent conductor, coaxing hundreds of instruments to play in harmony, shaping your movements into something fluid and precise. It does all of this quietly, tirelessly, and almost entirely without thanks, a performance so flawless you hardly ever realize you're watching it. Deep inside your brain, tucked just above where the optic nerves cross paths, is a tiny cluster of about 20,000 neurons that quietly keeps track of time. This minuscule structure, the suprachiasmatic nucleus, often called the SCN, is smaller than a grain of rice, yet it governs the rhythm of your entire life. It is your brain's master clock, orchestrating the daily ebb and flow of your energy, your mood, and even the way your cells function. Unlike the ticking hands of a watch, the SCN keeps time in a way that is alive. Each of its neurons runs on a roughly 24-hour cycle, their genes switching on and off in waves like microscopic tides. Together they synchronize the trillions of cells in your body, telling them when to wake up, when to rest, when to release hormones, and when to begin repairs. Without this coordination, your internal world would drift into chaos, like an orchestra without a conductor, each section playing at its own tempo, none of them in tune. This cycle is called the circadian rhythm, from the Latin for about a day. It is not perfectly 24 hours on its own. Left in constant darkness, your internal day would be closer to 24.5 hours, drifting a little later each day. To stay aligned with the outside world, the SCN resets itself each morning using light. Special cells in your eyes, separate from those used for sight, detect the brightness of daylight and send signals directly to the SCN. This gentle burst of sunlight acts like tapping the face of a clock, nudging your inner timekeeper back into sync. The SCN then broadcasts its schedule to the rest of your brain and body. It signals the pineal gland to stop producing melatonin, the hormone that makes you feel sleepy, as morning approaches. Later in the day, as light fades, it allows melatonin to rise again, gently pulling you towards sleep. It influences your body temperature, which tends to dip in the early morning and peak in the late afternoon, as well as your levels of cortisol, a hormone that helps you feel alert. These shifts happen like clockwork, often so subtly you never notice them, except, perhaps, when you try to stay awake at 3 in the morning and discover that your brain has other plans. This rhythm runs so deep that it touches almost every aspect of your biology. Your liver follows its own daily schedule of detoxifying chemicals. Your gut shifts its activity based on when it expects food. Even the cells in your skin divide more often at certain times of day. It is as if every cell has a tiny wristwatch, and the SCN is the unseen time zone coordinator, making sure they all strike noon together. Your brain takes this role surprisingly seriously for something that looks like a small squishy walnut. In its own quiet way, it is a very punctual lump. It insists that you sleep and wake on time, digest meals at predictable hours, and release hormones on schedule. When you defy this routine, staying up all night, skipping meals, or flying across time zones, your internal clocks fall out of sync with one another. This is what causes jet lag. The SCN has reset to the new light cycle, but the clocks in your liver, muscles, and other tissues are still living in your old time zone, leaving you feeling foggy and out of step until they catch up. The SCN is not your only clock, though. It is the master, but there are many others scattered throughout your body, like little neighborhood bell towers. These peripheral clocks keep their own local schedules but rely on cues from the SCN to stay coordinated. Food, exercise, and even social interaction can reset them. This is why eating at the same times each day can help anchor your sense of time, while irregular meals or late-night snacks can nudge your internal schedule off balance. Even your brain has smaller timekeepers that manage shorter rhythms within the day, called ultradian rhythms. These cycles govern things like your attention span, which naturally rises and dips every 90 minutes or so, and the timing of your sleep stages through the night. Layered together, they form a kind of intricate temporal architecture, an invisible scaffolding of time running through your mind. What is remarkable is how deeply this timing shapes your experience of reality. Your sense of morning or night is not simply based on looking out a window, it is woven into your brain chemistry. As light fades in the evening, your body temperature drops slightly, your reaction times slow, and your thinking grows softer at the edges. By dawn, when sunlight strikes your eyes again, your alertness sharpens and your thoughts gather speed. You ride this invisible wave every day, carried from sleepiness to alertness and back again by forces you can barely feel. These rhythms are ancient. Even tiny single-celled organisms that lived billions of years ago evolved primitive clocks to anticipate the coming of light and darkness. Your circadian system is their descendant, fine-tuned over countless generations to the rising and setting of the sun. It is one of the oldest pieces of biological machinery still ticking inside you, a reminder that your mind, however modern and full of thoughts, is still anchored to the turning of the earth. The elegance of this hidden clockwork can be easy to overlook. It does not announce itself with ticking or chiming. It simply guides you through the day like an invisible tide. When you feel that drowsy lull after lunch, when your focus sharpens in the early evening, when your eyelids grow heavy as night settles in, that is the SCN, quietly dimming or brightening the lights in the theatre of your mind. Even when you try to defy it, it waits patiently, keeping time until you return to its schedule. Shift workers and night owls can train themselves to operate on unusual hours, but their bodies often continue longing for a sunrise they rarely see. The clock inside your brain has no interest in your social calendar. It keeps its own ancient beat, one that has been keeping time long before alarms, calendars, or artificial lights existed, and perhaps there is something comforting in that. While the world spins unpredictably, while plans change and days blur together, your brain is quietly counting the hours with unwavering precision. A tiny speck of neurons, smaller than a seed, is steering your biology through the cycles of light and dark, nudging you gently from waking to sleep and back again. You are, after all, a creature of rhythms, built around tides of activity and rest, alertness and dreaming. And though your brain may be just a soft, silent lump, it is a remarkably punctual one, keeping the beat of your life even while you're too busy living it to notice. Each night, as darkness settles and your eyes grow heavy, your brain prepares to embark on one of its most essential and mysterious journeys. It slips away from the busy chatter of waking life and drifts into the quiet world of sleep, where time softens and thoughts dissolve into dreams. Sleep may seem like a simple pause, a blank stretch of hours between days, but within your brain it is anything but idle. It is a carefully orchestrated cycle, a slow dance through shifting states that restore your mind, repair your body, and sweep clean the clutter left behind by the day. As you begin to drift off, your brain eases into what is called non-rapid eye movement sleep, or NREM. This first stage is a fragile threshold between wakefulness and slumber. Your muscles relax, your heartbeat slows, and your thoughts slip from coherent sentences into loose, wandering fragments. Brain activity begins to slow, though it still hums with soft, irregular bursts of electrical pulses. It is as though the lights of the city in your mind are dimming, block by block, while a few windows still flicker awake here and there. A few minutes later, you sink into the second stage of NREM sleep, where the world outside begins to fade. Your body temperature drops slightly, your heart rate slows even more, and the chatter of the external world becomes muffled and distant. Your brain produces brief sparks of activity called sleep spindles, which ripple through your neural networks like soft gusts of wind rustling leaves. These spindles are thought to help lock away new memories, filing the day's experiences into long-term storage before they can fade. Then comes the third stage, known as slow-wave sleep, the deepest and most restorative phase of all. In this state, your brain's electrical rhythms slow to long, sweeping waves called delta waves, each one rising and falling like a distant drumbeat. Your breathing becomes steady and slow. Muscles are completely relaxed. This is the time when your body releases growth hormone, repairs tissues, and strengthens your immune system. It is also when the brain begins one of its quietest but most vital tasks, clearing out the waste products of its own activity. Throughout the day, as neurons fire and process information, they produce tiny molecular byproducts that build up in the spaces between brain cells. During slow-wave sleep, the brain's support cells shrink back slightly, expanding those spaces and allowing cerebrospinal fluid to wash through like a gentle tide. This fluid flushes away metabolic debris, including beta amyloid, a protein that can accumulate in conditions like Alzheimer's disease. It is as if the brain takes out its trash while you sleep, tidying up the mental workspace for another day of thinking. After about an hour or so in this deep NREM sleep, something curious happens. Your brain begins to stir again, electrical activity quickens, and your eyes start darting rapidly beneath your eyelids. You enter the realm of rapid eye movement sleep, REM, where dreams unfurl in vivid colour and motion. In this stage, your brain's activity patterns look remarkably similar to wakefulness, with fast, chaotic bursts of electrical signals weaving through the cortex. Yet your body is paralysed, a safety measure that keeps you from acting out the strange stories your mind is spinning. During REM sleep, the brain becomes a kind of playwright and stage crew all at once, taking fragments of memories and emotions and stitching them into surreal narratives. These dreams are often illogical, yet emotionally powerful. They blend the mundane with the impossible, a familiar childhood street bathed in moonlight, a voice you have not heard in years speaking from a stranger's face. No one fully understands why we dream, but many scientists believe it helps the brain process emotional experiences, strengthen important memories, and loosen rigid patterns of thought, sparking creativity. The night is not a straight slide from light sleep to deep sleep and then to dreaming. Instead, you cycle through these stages in repeating patterns about 90 minutes long. Early in the night, slow-wave sleep dominates, giving your body the restoration it needs. As morning approaches, REM periods grow longer, filling your last hours of sleep with extended stretches of dreams. By the time you wake, you have usually completed 4 to 6 full cycles, each one gently reshaping your brain in ways you never feel but always carry with you. This rhythm of sleep is as ancient as it is essential. All animals that have been studied need some form of it, even tiny fruit flies and humble worms. For humans, the cost of skipping it is steep. A single night without enough sleep can fog your memory, dull your attention, and make your emotions waver like candle flames. After several nights of deprivation, the brain begins to misfire, slipping into brief micro-sleeps even while you are awake. Sleep is not a luxury or a pause from living. It is a foundational part of being alive, as vital as breathing and eating. Memory in particular depends on it. While you sleep, especially during NREM stages, your brain replays patterns of neural activity from the day, almost like rehearsing a piece of music. These replays help stabilize fragile new memories, transferring them from the hippocampus, where they are first stored, to the cortex, where they can last for years. REM sleep in turn seems to weave those memories into broader networks, linking new knowledge with old and pruning away the clutter that is no longer needed. It is as if each night your brain quietly reorganizes its library, shelving the useful books, recycling the outdated ones, and dusting off forgotten volumes for future use. Even your emotions are gently reshaped during sleep. The amygdala, a small almond-shaped structure involved in processing fear and stress, becomes less reactive after a good night's rest. It is soothed by the slow, even rhythms of deep sleep which dampen the day's sharp edges. REM sleep also softens the sting of painful memories, allowing you to revisit them without the same emotional jolt. In this way, sleep does not simply restore your brain's energy, it restores your emotional balance too. There is a quiet poetry to how it all unfolds. You close your eyes, the world fades, and your mind slowly folds inward, retreating from the sharp angles of reality. Thoughts blur at the edges, sounds become distant and muffled. It is like watching a city dim its lights one by one, the glow fading from the tallest towers down to the smallest windows, until only the faintest sparks remain. Then the city does something even more magical. It begins to rebuild itself in silence, sweeping the streets, repairing its foundations, and rehearsing tomorrow's performance before the sun rises. You never witness this work being done. When you wake, the scaffolding has been cleared away, the floors polished, and your mind feels subtly renewed, as if the clutter has been lifted and the air has grown clearer. That lightness you feel after a deep unbroken sleep is not an illusion. It is the quiet triumph of billions of neurons that have spent the night scrubbing, sorting, and restoring themselves, preparing your mind to meet the day again. And so, each night your brain sets sail on its silent voyage. It slips below the surface of awareness, drifting through waves of slow rhythm and bursts of vivid dreamlight, cleaning its depths and polishing its memories as it goes. By morning, it will return from that hidden ocean, carrying you gently back to waking life, rested, repaired, and ready to begin again. When you drift into the world of dreams, your brain becomes a quiet storyteller, spinning entire realities from thin air. One moment you're lying safely in your bed, and the next you're flying through a city made of glass, or wandering a childhood street that no longer exists, or speaking to someone who has been gone for years. These scenes often make little sense, yet while you are dreaming, they feel as solid and real as waking life. This strange transformation happens mostly during rapid eye movement sleep, or REM, when your brain seems to wake up inside its own private theatre, while the rest of your body remains perfectly still. During REM sleep, the electrical rhythms of the brain grow fast and chaotic, almost indistinguishable from those of wakefulness. The visual cortex flickers as if watching something intently. The limbic system, especially the amygdala, becomes highly active, infusing dreams with intense emotion. Meanwhile, the prefrontal cortex, which normally keeps your thoughts logical and orderly, grows unusually quiet. It steps aside, letting the rest of your mind wander without restraint. Without that steady voice of reason, your brain begins to weave wild connections, pulling fragments of memory and sensation into flowing, surreal narratives. Memories are the raw materials of dreams. Each day, your brain collects an immense number of impressions, sights, sounds, feelings, scraps of conversation, most of which fade from consciousness quickly. But they do not vanish. They settle like dust in the hippocampus where recent memories are stored. During sleep, especially in REM, these fragments are reactivated, often in unexpected combinations. A street you passed earlier might appear in a dream stitched to the facade of your old school, or your best friend's voice might emerge from a stranger's face. The brain is not simply replaying these memories, but reshuffling them, snipping them into pieces and gluing them into new patterns like a restless collage artist. This may explain why dreams often have a curious texture, vividly detailed yet loosely connected. The visual and emotional centers of your brain are fully engaged, so the scenes feel rich and alive, but the logical circuits that would normally keep the story coherent are dozing. This is why you rarely question impossible things while dreaming. If you sprout wings and fly over an ocean of stars, your dreaming brain accepts it with perfect calm. Only when you wake does the strangeness strike you, like seeing the set lights after the curtain has fallen. For centuries, people have wondered why we dream at all. Ancient cultures saw dreams as messages from gods or windows into hidden realms. Modern science offers more earthly explanations, though none are yet proven. One prominent idea is that dreaming helps consolidate memories. As your brain replays and reorganizes the day's experiences, dreams might be the flickering side effect of that process, like seeing sparks from a machine polishing gears. This fits with the fact that REM sleep, when dreaming is most intense, is also the time when your brain is most actively strengthening neural connections and pruning away weak ones. Another theory suggests that dreams are a kind of emotional rehearsal space. Because the amygdala and other emotion processing regions are so active during REM, dreaming might allow your brain to safely revisit difficult feelings without the immediate stress of waking life. This could help explain why people often dream about things they fear or worry about. The dreams may not solve the problem, but they could soften its sting, teaching your brain to respond with less alarm when it appears again. There is also the threat simulation theory, which proposes that dreaming evolved as a way to practice survival. In the distant past, a dream of being chased by a predator might have helped our ancestors rehearse escape strategies without real danger. Even today, dreams often carry a subtle flavour of tension or urgency. Missed buses, looming deadlines, endless staircases that lead nowhere. These scenarios may be echoes of an ancient instinct to prepare for challenges before they arrive. Some researchers see dreams as a kind of neural housekeeping. The brain is flooded with information each day, far more than it can store. Dreams might be the byproduct of sorting and discarding that torrent of data, like the mind's version of sweeping a cluttered desk. As irrelevant details are erased and useful ones saved, the scraps swirl together into fleeting scenes that vanish by morning. And then there is the idea that dreaming fosters creativity. By disconnecting the strict rules of waking logic, dreams let the brain explore strange combinations it would never consider during the day. Artists, inventors, and scientists have often described ideas arriving from dreams, a melody, a painting, even the structure of a molecule. The mind, freed from its usual boundaries, can wander the labyrinth of its own memories and stumble upon unexpected treasures. No matter which purpose is closest to the truth, dreams reveal something profound about the brain's nature. They show that your mind is not a passive recorder of reality, but a ceaseless creator, forever building worlds. Even as you lie still in darkness, your brain is lighting up with rivers of activity, constructing entire landscapes out of old impressions, shaping characters from the faces of strangers, and breathing motion into empty space. The content of dreams may be strange, but the feelings they carry are often achingly real. Fear can race through a dream as powerfully as it does when you are awake. Joy can bloom like sunlight, sorrow can ache in your chest, and love can feel as warm as ever, even if the person you are dreaming of is long gone. In dreams, your emotional brain speaks in symbols rather than words, telling stories that your waking mind may not fully understand but still remembers as something meaningful. When you wake, the logic of dreams dissolves quickly, their sharp edges melting away like frost. Yet a lingering mood often remains, a quiet echo of the emotions your brain was rehearsing. This is perhaps the most mysterious part. Dreams leave behind no physical trace, yet they can change how you feel long after they vanish. They are like whispered messages passed from the hidden depths of your mind, fleeting yet powerful. It's astonishing to realize that this nightly theatre, so vivid and strange, unfolds entirely inside your skull. There are no sounds, no lights, no actors on a stage, only neurons sparking in darkness, weaving stories from the raw fabric of memory. Your dreaming brain is a silent playwright, composing tales for an audience of one, and each night as you surrender to sleep, you step onto its shifting stage, unaware that the most fantastical worlds you will ever visit are the ones quietly blooming behind your closed eyes. Memory is the mind's quiet time machine, ferrying you back through the invisible corridors of your own past. With a single thought, you can revisit a childhood street, smell the dusty pages of a book you once loved, or hear the laughter of someone you have not seen in years. These moments may seem solid and unchanging, but the truth is far stranger. Memory is not a tidy library of neatly filed records. It is alive, constantly rebuilt each time you summon it, shaped by the rhythms and quirks of the brain. Every memory begins as raw experience, arriving through your senses in a torrent of colour, sound, and sensation. As you notice something, a face, a voice, the warmth of sunlight on your skin, networks of neurons in your brain flash to life. This first stage is called encoding. It is not simply about recording information, but transforming it into patterns of electrical activity that the brain can store. Your attention plays a crucial role here. The brain is flooded with stimuli every moment, far more than it can possibly keep, so it chooses what to save based on what matters most to you at the time. If something sparks emotion or feels important, it is far more likely to be encoded. Once a moment is encoded, it must be stabilized, or it will fade like mist. This is where the hippocampus, a curved structure deep in the temporal lobes, becomes vital. The hippocampus acts like a kind of air traffic controller for memories, receiving these fragile new patterns from across the brain and helping consolidate them. It links the who, what, where, and when of an experience into a single coherent trace. Over the hours and days that follow, especially during sleep, the hippocampus gradually transfers these traces to the cortex, the outer layer of the brain, where they can be stored more permanently. This process is not like moving files into a cabinet. It is more like planting seeds. As memories are replayed and reactivated, they grow new connections across the brain's networks. Pieces of the memory settle in different regions. Visual details in the visual cortex, sounds in the auditory cortex, emotions in the amygdala, and so on. When you recall the moment later, your brain rapidly reassembles these scattered fragments, pulling them together into the seamless movie of a memory. Retrieval, the act of remembering, is where the time machine truly whirs to life. A cue, a smell, a word, a familiar place, triggers the hippocampus to reactivate the pattern of neural activity linked to that memory. Within moments, the fragments stored in different areas of the cortex light up, and the past floods back into your mind. You do not just think about the memory, you relive it, at least partially, as if the brain has temporarily rebuilt the world of that moment around you. This is why a single scent can transport you across decades in an instant. But this reconstruction comes at a curious cost. Memories are not fixed snapshots. They are more like paintings that are touched up each time they are viewed. When you recall a memory, your brain briefly destabilizes it, pulling it from storage into an active, flexible state. While it is active, new information and emotions can blend into it. When the memory is stored again, it carries traces of this new context. This process, called reconsolidation, means that every time you remember something, you're also subtly rewriting it. This is why two people can remember the same event so differently, or why stories from your own life may shift slightly over time. The core of the experience might remain, but the edges blur and new details creep in. Your memories are not faithful recordings of the past. They are living, evolving stories, shaped as much by who you are now as by who you were then. Even your mood can tint them, making the same memory seem warm and golden one day and distant or bittersweet the next. The fragility of memory might sound like a flaw, but it is also what makes it powerful. Because memories are flexible, they can be updated with new insights and integrated into the broader tapestry of your life. This ability helps you learn, adapt, and make sense of the world as it changes. If memories were perfectly fixed, your mind would be a cluttered attic full of unchanging relics. Instead, it is more like a flowing river, reshaping its banks with every passing current. The brain even uses forgetting as a kind of hidden tool. Only the most meaningful or frequently revisited memories are maintained, while countless others quietly fade. This selective pruning prevents your mind from becoming overloaded with irrelevant details. Imagine remembering every face you have ever seen on a crowded street. The noise would drown out everything else. By letting go of the trivial, the brain makes space for what matters most. Emotion has a profound influence on which memories endure. The amygdala, which processes fear and pleasure, interacts closely with the hippocampus during memory formation. Strong emotions release stress hormones that boost the consolidation of those moments, which is why intensely happy or frightening events often stay crystal clear for years. This can be useful, but it can also etch painful experiences deeply into your mind, sometimes too deeply. Even so, these memories can soften over time, their sharp edges worn down by the gentle reshaping that happens each time you revisit them. Sleep is another silent ally of memory. While you rest, your brain replays patterns of activity from the day, especially in the hippocampus, reinforcing their connections. This is one reason why studying before sleep can help you remember, and why new skills often feel easier after a good night's rest. Sleep does not just protect memories, it weaves them into your existing knowledge, linking today's lessons with yesterday's wisdom. Even the act of imagining the future draws on memory. When you picture something that has not yet happened, planning a trip, rehearsing a conversation, dreaming about possibilities, your brain activates many of the same networks it uses to recall the past. It rearranges pieces of old memories into new combinations, building possible futures from the bricks of what you have already known. In this sense, memory is not just about looking backward, it is the foundation for looking forward too. It can be humbling to realize how much of your identity depends on this delicate process. Who you believe yourself to be, your personality, your preferences, your life story, is built from memories, yet those memories are fluid, shifting quietly with each retelling. The person you remember being is not a perfect copy of who you were, but a version shaped by the person you are now. And the person you are becoming will, in turn, reshape how you remember this very moment. So much of what you call reality is really memory, electrical echoes of vanished moments stitched together into a sense of continuity. Your brain does this so smoothly that you rarely notice the seams. You live inside an unbroken story, unaware of how often your mind edits the pages, and yet, despite its flaws and flickers, memory is the thread that ties your life together, the fragile bridge that lets you walk back through time. Each time you reach across that bridge, you're not simply retrieving the past, you're recreating it, bringing it alive again inside your mind's quiet theatre. And when the memory fades back into silence, it carries traces of the present with it, forever changed by the act of being remembered. In this way, your memories are not just records of who you have been, they are living reflections of who you are, and who, piece by piece, you are still becoming. Your brain is not fixed like a sculpture carved from stone. It is more like a living garden, endlessly sprouting, pruning, and reshaping itself as you move through life. Every new skill you learn, every memory you form, and every habit you practice leaves a physical trace within this garden of neurons. Learning is not just an abstract idea, it is a literal change in the structure of your brain, a quiet rewiring that happens moment by moment, often without you even realizing it. At the heart of this transformation are the connections between neurons called synapses. Each neuron can form thousands of these tiny junctions with its neighbours, creating a dense forest of interwoven branches. When you encounter something new, a word in an unfamiliar language, a piece of music you have never heard, a pattern you have never seen, certain groups of neurons begin to fire together. Their repeated activity strengthens the synapses between them, like worn footpaths becoming well-trodden trails. This process is one of the brain's most fundamental tricks. Cells that fire together, wire together. As these connections strengthen, signals travel more easily between the neurons. Communication becomes faster and more reliable, and the pattern of activity becomes more likely to fire again in the future. This phenomenon is known as long-term potentiation, or LTP, and it is widely considered one of the key cellular foundations of learning and memory. In essence, LTP is the brain's way of saying, "This matters. Remember this." Long-term potentiation works like a subtle sculptor. Imagine two neurons connected by a synapse. When they are activated together repeatedly, chemical changes occur that increase the sensitivity of the receiving neuron. The sending neuron may also release more neurotransmitter, and the physical structure of the synapse may grow, forming new receptor sites to catch incoming signals. Over time, what began as a faint whisper of electrical communication becomes a clear and powerful voice. The path between the two neurons is no longer tentative, it is a well-built bridge. This strengthening does not happen everywhere at once. The brain is selective, focusing its energy on the pathways you use most often. This is why practice is so effective. When you rehearse a new skill, such as playing a piano scale or speaking a new phrase, you're repeatedly activating the same sets of neurons. Each repetition nudges their synapses a little stronger, their communication a little faster, until the skill becomes smooth and automatic. What begins as effortful and clumsy eventually becomes something your brain can perform almost without thinking. But the brain is not only a builder, It is also a careful gardener, pruning connections that are rarely used. This process, called synaptic pruning, helps clear away old or inefficient pathways to make room for new growth. In childhood, this pruning is especially intense. A child's brain has far more synapses than an adult's, and many are gradually trimmed as experience shapes the most useful ones. Yet pruning continues quietly throughout life. It is the reason you can forget old skills if you do not practice them, and why learning something new sometimes feels like making space in a crowded attic. What makes this system extraordinary is that it never fully stops. For much of history, scientists believed that the adult brain was static, that once development ended, its structure was set. But research has shown the opposite. The brain remains plastic, meaning it can change and adapt for your entire life. This plasticity is not limited to forming new memories. It can reorganize entire regions to take on new functions if needed. People who lose their sight often develop enhanced hearing or touch, as the visual cortex begins processing non-visual information. Musicians who practice for decades show enlarged areas of the brain related to finger control and auditory processing. Even in old age, the brain continues to sprout new connections when challenged with novel tasks. This adaptability is possible partly because of the brain's vast network of supporting cells and its ability to grow new neurons in certain regions, a process called neurogenesis. The hippocampus, deeply involved in memory and learning, is one of the few places where new neurons are born throughout life. These fresh neurons can integrate into existing networks, offering the brain new flexibility and capacity to store information. They are like new seedlings planted in an old forest, quietly expanding the canopy. Plasticity is not only about adding and pruning, it is also about rerouting. When one pathway is damaged, after a stroke for example, neighbouring regions can sometimes take over its functions. This rewiring does not happen instantly, but with therapy and practice, the brain can recruit alternative circuits to compensate. It is a reminder that the brain is not a rigid machine with single-purpose parts. It is a shifting mosaic, always ready to rearrange itself to keep you functioning in the world. This constant remodeling has another curious consequence. It means that every thought, every experience, subtly reshapes who you are. Your daily habits carve tiny grooves into the structure of your brain, strengthening some pathways while allowing others to fade. Reading, solving puzzles, learning new skills, or even exploring unfamiliar places all help weave fresh circuits. Over time, the landscape of your mind becomes the echo of how you have spent your life. Learning, then, is not something that happens only in classrooms or during formal study. It is the quiet background process of living itself. The simple act of noticing something new, a pattern in the clouds, a word you have never heard, a melody drifting through the air, sets off the machinery of plasticity. Your neurons respond, your synapses shift, and your brain reshapes itself to hold the moment. You may not feel the change as it happens, but it is there, tucked invisibly into the folds of your cortex. This flexibility is one of the reasons the human brain is so resilient. It allows you to adapt to new challenges, recover from setbacks, and reinvent yourself when the world demands it. Even if old paths crumble, new ones can be built. This is why learning can be exhilarating. It is not just gaining knowledge, but watching your mind expand into new territory. And yet the brain performs all this work without ceremony. It does not announce when it has strengthened a pathway or planted a new neuron. It simply hums along, shaping itself like a river carving new channels through stone. The changes are slow and silent, but their effects are profound. They are the reason you can remember a face, speak a language, solve a problem, or play a song you once struggled to learn. There is something deeply mysterious in this. You are not the same person you were a year ago, or even yesterday, because your brain has been quietly rearranging itself with every experience. The map of your mind is redrawn each night, its roads shifting, its bridges reinforced or replaced, its neighbourhoods expanding and contracting like the breathing of a living city. And all the while, it keeps building, keeps adapting, keeps preparing you for the unknown days ahead. Learning is often described as storing information, but perhaps it is more like growing. Your brain is not a dusty archive, but a vibrant living garden, its vines of neurons twisting and branching toward new light. Every new connection is a promise, a doorway to some future skill or idea you do not yet know you will need. It is this ceaseless growth, this quiet plasticity, that makes the human mind so extraordinary. not just what it knows, but its endless ability to become something more. Emotions are often seen as wild, fleeting things, sudden waves that sweep over you, unpredictable and untamed. Yet beneath their surface lies an intricate network of structures deep inside your brain, quietly shaping every shade of feeling you experience. This network is called the limbic system, and it is among the oldest parts of your brain in evolutionary terms. Long before there were words or logic, there were feelings, guiding our ancient ancestors through the world. Even now, in all its modern complexity, your brain is still steered by these silent emotional currents. At the heart of this system is the amygdala, a pair of small almond-shaped clusters nestled deep within the temporal lobes. The amygdala is often described as the brain's emotional alarm bell, scanning everything you see and hear for signs of danger. If something seems threatening, a sudden loud noise, a shadow moving where it shouldn't, the amygdala reacts in an instant, sparking fear and triggering your body's fight or flight response. It can do this in mere milliseconds, long before your conscious mind even understands what's happening. This is why you might jump before realizing what startled you. But the amygdala is not only about fear. It responds to any strong emotion, from joy and excitement to anger and awe. It tags emotional significance onto memories, making sure that moments charged with feeling are stored more vividly. A joyful reunion, a moment of triumph, or the sharp sting of embarrassment. These all glow more brightly in your memory because the amygdala marked them as important. In this way, it helps your brain prioritize what matters most for your survival and your sense of meaning. Working alongside the amygdala is the hypothalamus, a tiny structure about the size of a pea sitting just below it. The hypothalamus is like the limbic system's control panel, linking emotion to the body's physical responses. When the amygdala sounds its alarm, the hypothalamus sends signals through the nervous system that increase your heart rate, raise your blood pressure, and flood your bloodstream with stress hormones like adrenaline and cortisol. It is this rapid cascade that prepares your body to act, to run, to fight, or to stand frozen and alert. The hypothalamus also regulates slower, subtler rhythms that shape your mood, like hunger, thirst, body temperature, and the release of hormones from the pituitary gland. These quiet adjustments can gently colour your emotional state without you realising it. A drop in blood sugar can make you irritable. Warm sunlight on your skin can soothe you. Emotions are not just in your mind. They ripple through your body as carefully tuned biological responses. Other parts of the limbic system weave into this network as well. The hippocampus, which helps form new memories, works closely with the amygdala to tie emotions to experiences. The anterior cingulate cortex, perched on the edge of the limbic system, helps monitor emotional conflicts and smooth out your reactions. Together, these structures create a hidden foundation for everything you feel, quietly steering your behavior long before you become aware of it. Emotions might seem chaotic, but they serve as vital survival signals. Long before humans could reason through situations, emotions offered quick guidance. Fear urged our ancestors to run from predators. Anger spurred them to defend their territory. Affection bound them to one another, helping them form families and communities. Even today, emotions act like a fast, instinctive compass, pointing you toward what is safe, what is rewarding, and what is dangerous, often faster than thought itself. Yet emotions are not simply about survival. They are also how the brain assigns meaning. Every experience you have is tinged with a faint wash of feeling, from delight to boredom to unease. This emotional colouring shapes how you perceive the world and how you remember it later. A conversation that leaves you happy might seem brighter and more vivid in your mind, while one that leaves you anxious may seem hazy and dim. Feelings are the filters through which you see reality, tinting the world in shifting hues. They also help guide your attention. When something sparks emotion, your brain tunes in more closely, sharpening your focus. This is why you remember moments of strong feeling so clearly. The birth of a child, the thrill of a performance, the shock of sudden news. The limbic system is gently whispering, "This matters. Pay attention." Even subtle emotions can nudge your thoughts, steering your mind toward what might be important or away from what might be risky. Despite their power, emotions are not separate from reason. The prefrontal cortex, which governs planning and decision-making, constantly exchanges signals with the limbic system. It can calm the amygdala's alarms, weighing emotional impulses against long-term goals. At the same time, the limbic system provides the prefrontal cortex with essential information about what matters to you. Thought without feeling is cold and directionless, while feeling without thought can be impulsive and chaotic. Only together do they create something human. Your emotional brain is not trying to control you. It is trying to protect you, connect you, and guide you through a world that is far too complex to navigate on logic alone. It speaks in waves of sensation rather than words, a quickened pulse, a flutter in the chest, a tightening of the throat. Often it whispers before it shouts, giving you gentle nudges that something is safe or dangerous, comforting or unsettling. It does not demand your attention, yet it quietly shapes almost everything you do. Emotions can sometimes feel like storms passing through your mind, but they are also the currents that carry you through life. They draw you toward the people you love, away from the things that harm you, and toward the experiences that make life meaningful. Even the fleeting, subtle ones, the quiet contentment of a familiar room, the soft ache of nostalgia, the spark of curiosity, are part of this vast, silent guidance system. It can be strangely humbling to realize how much of your world is colored by this ancient circuitry, still humming away inside your modern mind. The amygdala and hypothalamus are tiny, but their influence ripples through every corner of your brain, like hidden strings quietly pulling the fabric of your thoughts and actions. Feelings may seem ephemeral, but they are as real and physical as your heartbeat, woven into your biology as deeply as your bones. And though they can be unruly at times, they are also what make life rich. Without fear, there would be no courage. Without sadness, no joy. Without affection, the world would be cold and empty. Your emotional brain does more than keep you alive. It fills your life with color, meaning, and connection. It reminds you, even in your quietest moments, that being alive is not just about surviving, but about feeling. Your brain might seem like the command center for thoughts, memories, and daydreams, but its most constant and vital work happens far beneath your awareness. Every second of your life, it is quietly orchestrating the rhythm of your body, your heartbeat, your breathing, your blood pressure, your temperature, the swirl of hormones in your bloodstream. While your mind drifts from one idea to another, your brain is keeping the machinery of being alive humming along with seamless precision. Much of this hidden choreography is handled by the autonomic nervous system, a vast network of nerves that stretches from your brainstem through your spinal cord and out to every organ. The word autonomic hints at its nature. It works automatically, without the need for conscious effort. You don't have to remember to inhale to adjust your blood sugar, or to release the hormones that keep you awake in the morning. Your brain does all of it in the background, like a tireless caretaker who never asks for thanks. The brainstem is the hub of this system, and it is astonishingly diligent. Inside its compact structure are clusters of neurons that monitor your body's internal state and send out moment-by-moment instructions. The medulla oblongata at the base of the brainstem controls your heartbeat and breathing with quiet precision. It receives signals from sensors in your blood vessels that measure oxygen and carbon dioxide, then adjusts your breathing rate as needed, faster when you run, slower when you sleep. Just above it, the pons helps coordinate breathing with other actions like swallowing or speaking, so that these rhythms never clash. Breathing might seem simple, but it is remarkably intricate. With each inhale, your brain sends signals down the spinal cord to the muscles of your diaphragm, telling them to contract and pull air into your lungs. At the same time, it subtly adjusts the width of the airways and the rate of your heartbeat, syncing the whole process like an elegant clockwork. When you exhale, it releases those signals, letting the muscles relax and the air drift out again. This quiet cycle repeats around 20,000 times a day, all without a single conscious command. Your heartbeat is equally constant and carefully tuned. The brainstem keeps a close watch on blood pressure, using baroreceptors in your arteries to sense the stretch of blood flow. If pressure drops, the brain speeds your heart and tightens your blood vessels to keep blood reaching every corner of your body. If pressure rises, it slows your heart and eases the vessels open. These adjustments are subtle and swift, often happening in less than a second. To you, it simply feels like a steady pulse, but beneath that calm surface is a finely tuned feedback system, running every moment of your life. Overlaying this quiet control are two complementary branches of the autonomic nervous system, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. They are like two modes of being balanced in an elegant tug-of-war. The sympathetic branch prepares you for action. When danger looms or excitement surges, it releases a cascade of signals that quicken your heartbeat, dilate your pupils, and flood your blood with adrenaline and glucose. This is the classic fight-or-flight response, a surge of energy designed to keep you alive. Once the danger passes, the parasympathetic branch takes the reins. It slows your heartbeat, deepens your breathing, stimulates digestion, and guides your body back into its restful rhythm. This is the rest and digest state, when your body repairs itself, absorbs nutrients, and stores energy for the future. These two branches alternate constantly, like the rise and fall of waves, keeping you poised between readiness and recovery. Even small shifts in your thoughts or surroundings can tip the balance. A sudden noise nudges you toward alertness. A warm meal pulls you gently back toward calm. The hypothalamus, nestled deep in your brain, sits like a watchful conductor over this entire system. It links your nervous system to your endocrine system, the network of hormone-secreting glands scattered throughout your body. When the hypothalamus senses that something needs to change, that you're cold, stressed, hungry, or sleepy, it releases its own chemical messengers to the pituitary gland just below it. The pituitary then dispatches hormones into your bloodstream which signal other glands to act. This cascade can shift the whole tone of your body. If the hypothalamus senses stress, for example, it sets off a chain reaction that prompts your adrenal glands to release cortisol. Cortisol raises blood sugar and sharpens your alertness, readying you to handle the challenge. When the challenge passes, the hypothalamus senses this too, and gradually eases the system back down. It is like an invisible thermostat, constantly measuring and adjusting to keep your inner environment steady. These feedback loops are astonishingly precise. Temperature regulation alone involves dozens of moving parts. The hypothalamus monitors the warmth of your blood, triggers sweat glands to cool you, or tiny muscles in your skin to make you shiver, adjusts your blood flow to preserve or release heat, and even changes your appetite and activity level. All of this unfolds silently and automatically, as though your brain were quietly fine-tuning the weather inside your own body. Even your emotions ripple through this system. A flash of anxiety can raise your heart rate, tighten your chest, and quicken your breath, because the amygdala alerts the hypothalamus, which rallies the sympathetic branch of the autonomic system. A sense of safety can do the opposite, letting the parasympathetic system slow your heart and relax your muscles. The boundary between brain and body is not a boundary at all, but a conversation, with each side constantly influencing the other. This conversation flows upward too, from body to brain. Your organs send streams of signals back to your brainstem and hypothalamus, reporting on oxygen, nutrients, and chemical balance. Even the beating of your heart and the stretching of your gut feeds subtle signals into regions that shape your mood and attention. The flutter in your chest when you are nervous, or the calm heaviness after a good meal, are not just feelings in your mind. They are the echo of your body's internal rhythms reaching your brain. What is striking is how much of this constant activity never reaches your awareness. While you ponder your plans or drift through thoughts, millions of messages are flashing between brain and body each second, keeping your temperature stable, your blood flowing, and your lungs filling with air. You do not command this system. You simply inhabit it, like a passenger carried gently along by an invisible current. It is easy to think of your brain and body as separate, with one controlling the other, but they are more like two sides of a single living loop. The brain does not just issue orders, it listens, adjusts, and responds in real time to the signals coming back from the body. This partnership is what keeps you alive, moment to moment, through every rise and fall of your heartbeat and every breath that slips in and out unnoticed. And through it all, your brain remains utterly calm, like a conductor who never lifts their eyes from the music. It does not rush or hesitate. It simply keeps the rhythm, the silent pulse of breath, the quiet beat of blood, carrying you through the hours as steadily as a tide. While your thoughts wander, your body and brain continue their endless duet, perfectly timed, perfectly balanced, perfectly alive. Language is one of the brain's most astonishing creations, a silent code that lets one mind plant thoughts inside another. With nothing more than tiny bursts of sound or marks on a page, we can conjure entire worlds, pass along memories, and share feelings that no one else could ever see. This ability is so effortless in daily life that it can be easy to forget how extraordinary it really is. Beneath every word you speak or read is a delicate ballet of neurons, quietly translating the chaos of thought into structured symbols and back again. Hidden deep in the folds of your brain are two small regions that lie at the heart of this dance, Broca's area and Wernicke's area. They sit in opposite corners of the brain's language network, like two ends of a bridge. Broca's area, tucked in the left frontal lobe, is the planner and builder of speech. When you want to say something, Broca's area assembles the sounds and grammar, choreographing the muscles of your lips, tongue, and vocal cords to deliver them in the right order. Damage to this area makes speech halting and effortful, like trying to push words through heavy sand. On the other side, in the left temporal lobe, lies Wernicke's area. The listener and interpreter, it decodes the meaning of words, allowing you to understand spoken and written language. When Wernicke's area is damaged, people can still speak fluently, but their sentences may become tangled and nonsensical, like songs with the melody intact, but the meaning missing. Between these two hubs runs a thick bundle of nerve fibers called the arcuate fasciculus, a high-speed highway that keeps understanding and expression tightly linked. Of course, language is far more than these two regions. It is a vast network, weaving through the auditory cortex that hears words, the visual cortex that reads them, the motor cortex that moves your mouth and hands, and the frontal lobes that shape your ideas. Words are not born in one place. They are braided together from many threads. Sensation, memory, intention, all converging into the delicate shape of a sentence. What makes this network even more fascinating is that it does not just express your thoughts, it helps shape them. The language you use carves grooves in the way you see the world, like a river channeling water into certain paths. Different languages divide reality in different ways. Some have dozens of words for shades of snow, others use entirely different structures for time or direction. People who grow up speaking languages that place great emphasis on spatial relationships, for instance, often have stronger navigational skills. Those who speak languages that mark the future differently from the present sometimes think about long-term plans in distinct ways. Even subtle differences can guide your thinking. The words you choose can colour your emotions, make problems feel heavier or lighter, and shape how you interpret events. When you give something a name, your brain treats it differently. Easier to hold, easier to analyse, easier to remember. Without language, thoughts are hazy clouds. With language, they crystallise into sharp edges. Inside your own mind, language is also the thread that holds your inner world together. You carry on a constant quiet conversation with yourself, a stream of inner speech that runs beneath your awareness. This inner voice plans your day, rehearses conversations, narrates what you see, and debates your decisions. It loops through your mind like a soft echo, shaping how you experience reality. This inner speech draws on the same brain regions as external speech. When you silently talk to yourself, Broca's area and Wernicke's area spark with activity, even though your lips stay still. Your brain treats imagined words almost like spoken ones, rehearsing their patterns without sending the final signal to your muscles. This might be why thinking in words can feel so tangible, as though you're speaking inside your own skull. Inner speech also links closely with memory. You often use it to tag experiences, silently labeling them as they happen. These labels help the hippocampus store the events more efficiently, which is why saying things out loud or writing them down can make them easier to remember. Inner speech is like a thin golden thread tying the moments of your life together, keeping them from slipping away into the blur of time. Sometimes, though, this thread can become tangled. The same loops of inner speech that help you plan and reflect can also spiral into rumination. Those moments when your thoughts chase their own tails, repeating worries or regrets. This happens because your brain's default mode network, which activates during introspection, keeps feeding material into Broca's area, which keeps quietly voicing it. It is like an echo chamber that forgot how to switch itself off. Understanding this can be strangely freeing. It reminds you that the voice in your head is not an absolute truth, just a pattern of neurons humming along out of habit. Even when it goes unnoticed, language shapes the rhythm of your mind. It gives your thoughts structure, breaks them into steps, and allows you to hold several ideas at once like pieces on a mental chessboard. Without language, thoughts would be fleeting sparks. With it, they become intricate tapestries you can examine, rearrange and share. Language also lets minds link together, building vast webs of shared knowledge. Every word you know is the product of countless brains over countless years, passed from one mouth to another like a torch. When you speak, you're not just expressing your own thoughts, you're drawing on an ancient collective, using tools shaped by generations who came before you. The words feel personal, but they are part of something far larger, flowing through time like a river that never dries. It is strange to think that this entire universe of meaning lives in the soft folds of your brain, built from cells that fire tiny pulses of electricity. There are no actual words inside your skull, no sound or ink, only patterns of neurons sparking in silence. Yet those patterns can carry ideas across oceans and centuries, from one mind to another. They can build civilizations, preserve history, and spark revolutions. They can soothe, persuade, or inspire. And all of this unfolds so smoothly that you rarely notice the machinery at work. You simply open your mouth and words appear. You read a line of text and meaning blossoms in your mind, as if it had always been there. Beneath that quiet magic is a hidden network of circuits, ancient yet endlessly flexible, translating thought into language and language back into thought. In this way, language is not just something your brain does. It is something your brain is, a living architecture of symbols and sounds that shapes how you see the world and who you understand yourself to be. It is the bridge between your private inner realm and the shared world beyond your skin. And every time your thoughts loop silently in words, you are walking that bridge, weaving your mind into the vast tapestry of human meaning. Your brain might sit alone inside your skull, sealed off from the world in silence and darkness, but it is hopelessly obsessed with other brains. It spends much of its time trying to guess what they are thinking, predicting how they will act, and imagining what they might be feeling. You could say it is addicted to other brains, an endlessly curious social sponge that lights up when it senses connection. Humans are wired not just to survive alongside one another, but to understand and synchronize with each other in ways that run far deeper than words. This social wiring begins with a peculiar kind of cell known as a mirror neuron. These neurons were first discovered in the brains of monkeys, where they fired both when the monkey performed an action and when it merely watched another do the same thing. The same kind of system exists in humans, and it hums constantly in the background of your life. If you see someone stub their toe, your mirror neurons echo the pattern of pain-related activity in your own brain. If you watch someone laugh, your motor areas light up as though you're preparing to laugh yourself. Mirror neurons are the quiet mimics inside your mind, constantly rehearsing the movements and emotions of those around you. This is one reason why yawns are contagious, why you wince when someone else gets hurt, and why you smile back almost automatically when someone smiles at you. Your brain is not just watching other people, it is simulating them, slipping briefly into their perspective without asking your permission. These fleeting echoes of other minds form the foundation of empathy, the ability to feel what someone else is feeling. But empathy goes even further, drawing on a network of brain regions, sometimes called the theory of mind system. This includes areas like the temporoparietal junction and the medial prefrontal cortex, which work together to imagine other people's thoughts, beliefs, and intentions. When you wonder why someone is upset or what they might do next, these regions spark to life, running quiet simulations of their inner world. What is remarkable is how naturally and constantly your brain does this. You do not have to stop and think, what is this person feeling? Your mind leaps to it automatically, weaving little models of other people from scraps of expression, tone, and body language. This is what lets you sense tension in a room before anyone speaks, or notice when a friend is pretending to be fine but isn't. Your brain is forever reaching beyond itself, quietly syncing with the emotions of others like invisible threads stretching from mind to mind. This social attunement is not just a pleasant bonus of being human. It is one of the brain's core priorities. Humans evolved as deeply cooperative creatures, dependent on one another to survive. For most of history, being cut off from the group was far more dangerous than facing wild animals or storms. Those who were better at reading faces, sensing moods, and predicting behavior had a huge advantage, and their brains gradually became sculpted by this need for connection. Even today, your brain treats social isolation as a kind of emergency. Loneliness triggers activity in the same brain regions that process physical pain, as if the mind were warning that something vital is missing. Social rejection can raise stress hormones and sharpen your sensitivity to threats, while social support can soothe your nervous system and strengthen your immune response. In many ways, your brain behaves as though connection is as essential as food or water. This is why conversation feels rewarding, why eye contact can spark tiny jolts of pleasure, and why shared laughter seems to dissolve tension like sunlight melting frost. Social interaction lights up the brain's reward circuits, releasing dopamine and oxytocin, the same chemicals linked to pleasure and bonding. These chemical rewards encourage you to seek out and maintain relationships, reinforcing the invisible web that ties you to others. Your brain does not stop at understanding others. It tries to align with them. When people talk, their brain rhythms subtly synchronize. Their neural oscillations begin to rise and fall in similar patterns, like two pendulums swinging together. Even heart rates and breathing can slip into sync during moments of deep connection. It is as if your brain is not content to merely watch another mind. It wants to dance in step with it. And all of this happens with startling speed. Within a fraction of a second, your brain can decode a fleeting micro-expression on someone's face or the smallest tremor in their voice. It can sense sarcasm, detect hidden emotions, and track multiple social dynamics at once. This ability is so deeply ingrained that much of it unfolds without conscious effort. You might feel like you're simply getting a vibe, but behind the scenes your brain is running complex calculations worthy of a supercomputer. Even your sense of self depends on this social machinery. The brain builds your identity partly by reflecting the reactions of others, like a mirror made of many faces. From childhood onward, you learn who you are by seeing how people respond to you, and their feedback becomes woven into your self-image. The social brain is not just about understanding other people. It is also about becoming someone in relation to them. This drive to connect can make human behavior beautifully cooperative, but also strangely fragile. Because the brain craves social harmony, criticism can sting more than logic says it should. Praise can feel disproportionately uplifting, like sunlight flooding a dark room. These reactions may seem emotional, but they are rooted in ancient neural circuitry that once helped keep your ancestors safely inside the group. The stakes were higher then, and your brain has not forgotten. Yet despite its old evolutionary roots, this social machinery is remarkably flexible. It allows you to connect not just with those nearby, but with minds you have never met. You can feel empathy for a character in a book, or cry over a stranger's story from centuries ago. Your brain can simulate their emotions as if they were standing in front of you. This ability to stretch empathy across time and distance has helped humans build vast networks of culture, art, and knowledge, linking countless minds together in a great invisible lattice. Perhaps that is the strangest thing of all. This solitary organ sealed inside your skull is, at its core, built for togetherness. It spends its days guessing, syncing, and resonating with other brains, even though it has never truly met them. And it rewards you for doing so, flooding you with calm and warmth whenever you feel understood, or see your feelings mirrored in someone else's eyes. Your brain might seem like a private world, but it is more like a glowing node in a vast constellation, forever drawn to the light of the minds around it. For all its complexity and curiosity, it is happiest when it is not alone, when it's humming in harmony with other brains, just as it was always meant to do. Creativity often feels like magic, a sudden spark, a flash of insight, an idea that appears out of nowhere. One moment your mind is blank, and the next it has conjured something entirely new, a melody, a story, a solution to a stubborn problem. It can seem like the brain has a secret trapdoor that occasionally opens, spilling out brilliance without warning. But behind this mystery lies a quiet, intricate process, one that relies on the brain's ability to wander, to connect the unlikely, and to weave logic and imagination into something entirely its own. At the heart of creativity is something called divergent thinking, the ability to generate many different ideas from a single starting point. Where logical, convergent thinking seeks one correct answer, divergent thinking lets the mind scatter in all directions, exploring possibilities without worrying if they are right or wrong. It is the difference between solving a puzzle and inventing a new game. When you brainstorm wildly, or let your thoughts drift into strange combinations, you're engaging this side of your mind. Divergent thinking draws on an unusually broad network of the brain. The frontal lobes help you break free from habitual patterns, while the temporal lobes supply fragments of memory and association. The parietal lobes mix sensory impressions into new forms, and the limbic system sprinkles in emotion and motivation. Even the cerebellum, better known for coordinating movement, contributes to the rhythm and timing of thought. Creativity is not the work of one region but of many, like a choir singing from different corners of the mind. But this chorus needs a conductor, and that role is played by the brain's executive control network. This network, centered in the prefrontal cortex, monitors your thoughts, focusing attention and keeping ideas organized. It is usually the voice of reason, filtering out what seems irrelevant or unrealistic. Yet in moments of creativity, it loosens its grip just enough to let unusual ideas slip through. It does not switch off, but shifts into a more flexible mode, allowing your mind to wander while still gently steering the direction. This delicate dance between control and freedom is key. Too much control and your thinking becomes rigid. Too little and it becomes chaotic. Creative moments often happen in the sweet spot where logic and imagination overlap, where the brain's executive network and its default mode network work together. The default mode network, which hums during daydreaming and rest, is like the mind's internal playground. It drifts through memories, emotions, and abstract ideas, making connections you would never think to look for. Daydreaming might seem aimless, but it is one of the brain's secret engines of creativity. When your attention drifts, the default mode network becomes active, linking distant bits of information that usually stay apart. This is why solutions often arrive when you're not trying to find them, in the shower, on a walk, just before sleep. Your brain is quietly rearranging the puzzle pieces of your experience, and when a new pattern fits, it surfaces as a sudden aha moment. This wandering state is also gentler on the brain's filters. Usually your mind screens out irrelevant thoughts to stay efficient, but during relaxed daydreaming the gates open wider, letting in odd associations and distant memories. A smell might spark a forgotten childhood scene, which links to an old melody, which twists into the seed of a new idea. Creativity often hides in these strange detours, where logic would never think to look. Emotion also plays a subtle role. The brain's reward circuits, especially those involving dopamine, become active when you stumble on a promising idea. That little spark of delight encourages you to explore further, building momentum. This is why creative work can feel both exhilarating and addictive. Each small discovery gives your brain a quiet rush of pleasure, like finding a hidden path in a familiar forest. Even the brain's hemispheres contribute in distinct ways. The left hemisphere, often linked to language and logic, helps structure and refine ideas, while the right hemisphere, with its broader associative style, helps leap to unexpected insights. They are not rivals, as popular myths suggest, but partners. The spark of creativity usually begins with the right's wide-ranging leaps, and then is shaped into something usable by the left's careful precision. It is a duet, not a duel. Curiously, the brain seems to prepare for creativity by lowering some of its usual barriers. Studies have found that just before a burst of insight, the visual cortex briefly quiets, as if the brain is tuning out the outside world to focus inward. The prefrontal cortex also relaxes slightly, letting go of strict self-monitoring. This temporary softening may explain why ideas often arrive when you are relaxed, distracted, or even a little sleepy. The watchful guard of logic steps aside and imagination slips through the gate. Once a creative idea appears, though, the brain quickly shifts gears. The executive network ramps back up, testing and refining the idea, pruning away what doesn't fit. This is the less glamorous side of creativity, the slow, careful work of shaping inspiration into something solid. It can feel tedious compared to the thrill of the initial spark, but it is just as essential. Without it, your ideas would remain beautiful but fragile, like soap bubbles that burst before they can be shared. All of this reveals something quietly profound. Creativity is not a single flash from a hidden corner of the brain. It is a rhythm, a back-and-forth conversation between freedom and discipline, chaos and order. The mind drifts outward, gathers strange treasures, then returns to sort and shape them. This pattern repeats again and again, like waves lapping at the shore, slowly carving something new from the raw material of thought. The most mysterious part is that your brain performs this dance without conscious effort. You cannot force inspiration to appear, only create the conditions for it to visit. Enough quiet for your mind to wander, enough curiosity to follow its detours, enough patience to let the slow work unfold. Creativity often feels like a gift from nowhere, but it is really your own mind surprising itself, showing you connections it quietly built while you were looking elsewhere. There is a certain beauty in this. Every idea you have ever had, every story, every invention, every sudden solution, began as a faint spark in the darkness of your mind, assembled by networks of cells that never see the world yet somehow capture its essence. The creative brain is not a single place, but a hidden conversation happening all the time, waiting for a quiet moment to speak. And when it does, it reminds you that even in stillness, your mind is endlessly weaving, shaping the unknown into something entirely new. Consciousness is perhaps the strangest thing your brain does. All the other functions are intricate yet somehow tangible, moving muscles, forming memories, regulating breath. But consciousness is different. It is the quiet glow that makes any of those things feel like something at all. Without it, the world would be soundless, colourless, and entirely empty. And yet this glow does not appear to belong to any single part of the brain. It is not stored in one pocket or switched on by one cluster of neurons. Instead, it seems to rise from the whole system working together, like light shimmering from the surface of deep water. Trying to understand how this happens has been one of science's most elusive quests. Your brain contains around 86 billion neurons, each passing tiny electrical whispers to its neighbours, and yet somehow out of this vast electrical storm comes the feeling of being you. Over the years, many ideas have been proposed, but two of the most influential are known as the global workspace theory and the integrated information theory. They do not claim to fully solve the mystery, but they offer intriguing ways to peer into its fog. Global workspace theory imagines the brain as a bustling theatre. Countless unconscious processes work backstage, each handling its own small task, processing vision, storing words, monitoring the body. Most of the time, these processes run quietly and invisibly, but when something needs your attention, it steps onto the mental stage. The spotlight of consciousness shines on it, and information from that process becomes available to the entire brain at once. In this view, consciousness is not a place but a broadcast. It happens when scattered parts of the brain link together briefly, sharing information across a network of long-range connections. This surge of integration allows distant regions to coordinate, forming a unified scene in your mind. You do not experience the countless tiny backstage operations, only the few that make it to the spotlight. It is as if your mind is constantly whispering to itself, and consciousness is the moment when the whispers become a chorus loud enough for the whole brain to hear. Integrated information theory approaches the mystery from a different angle. Instead of asking what brain structures are involved, it asks what kind of information structure could give rise to consciousness at all. According to this idea, consciousness emerges from systems that are both highly differentiated and highly unified. Each part of the system must be doing something unique, yet all the parts must influence each other in a deeply connected way. The theory measures this using a concept called phi, which represents how much information the system integrates as a whole. A collection of isolated parts with no connections would have almost no phi and no consciousness. A perfectly connected system where every part does the same thing would also have low phi, too uniform to create anything complex. But a network like the human brain, where each region contributes its own specialized activity yet stays richly linked to the others, has an extraordinarily high level of integrated information. That, the theory suggests, is what gives rise to the spark of awareness. Neither theory claims to explain exactly why these patterns of activity feel like anything from the inside. They simply offer a structure, a way to map the conditions under which consciousness seems to appear. Both agree on something profound. Consciousness does not live in any single neuron or region, but in the way the entire brain weaves itself together. Awareness may be less like a light bulb that switches on, and more like a symphony that emerges only when enough instruments are playing in harmony. Even with these ideas, the mystery remains stubborn. Consciousness resists being pinned down, perhaps because it is the very thing doing the pinning. It is what you use to study the world, yet it is also the part of you doing the studying. This circularity makes it slippery, like trying to hold your own shadow. You can measure brain activity during conscious states, You can even find the circuits that light up when someone reports an experience, but the actual feeling of being, the warm presence of awareness itself, still floats just beyond the reach of explanation. And yet, this intangibility gives it a kind of quiet beauty. It reminds you that not everything about the brain can be captured in diagrams or equations. Consciousness is not just information. It is the shimmer that makes information matter. It binds your perceptions, thoughts, and memories into a single flowing stream that you call your life. Without it, your brain might still process the world, but it would all pass by in silence, like a movie playing to an empty theatre. One of the most curious things about consciousness is how fragile it can be. It fades every night when you drift into deep sleep and returns each morning as if nothing happened. It can vanish under anesthesia and reappear as the drugs wear off, like a lantern flickering back to life. Sometimes it dims or fractures under injury, illness, or certain meditative states, showing that it is not a permanent essence but a delicate process, easily shifted by the rhythms of the brain. It is also astonishingly selective. At any moment, your brain is bombarded by vast amounts of sensory information: light, sound, touch, the position of your limbs, the churn of your organs, but you are aware of only a tiny sliver. The rest stays submerged, processed silently in the dark. Consciousness seems to float on top of a deep sea of hidden activity, like the visible tip of an iceberg. Most of your mind is invisible to you, yet it quietly shapes your thoughts and choices all the same. Perhaps this is what makes awareness feel so precious. It is the rare surface where the hidden depths briefly break through. When something rises into the global workspace, or when enough information binds tightly together, the lights come on, and for a fleeting moment, there is a sense of being. Not just processing the world, but inhabiting it. Not just reacting, but knowing that you are. No one fully knows why this happens, or why it should happen at all. There is nothing in a single neuron that hints at the glow of awareness, just electrical pulses and chemical whispers. Yet when enough of them join together, something wholly new seems to appear. It is as if the brain is not only thinking, but watching itself think, a loop of self-reflection so intricate that it begins to feel like someone is home. This self-reflective loop might be the key. Some researchers suggest that consciousness emerges when the brain not only builds a model of the world, but also builds a model of itself within that world. It simulates its own presence inside the scene, like a character looking out through its own eyes. This internal self-portrait might be what gives your experiences that unmistakable sense of mine. And yet, for all the theories, the essence of consciousness remains elusive, perhaps necessarily so. Trying to observe it directly is like trying to see your own eyes without a mirror. It is always the observer, never the observed. You can trace its outlines, map its correlates, and measure its rhythms, but the actual experience, the quiet sense of being awake in the world, will always be something you stand inside, not something you can stand apart from. Maybe that is what makes it so compelling. Among all the brain's wonders, its precision, its memory, its creativity, consciousness stands apart as its most mysterious and its most personal. It is the soft glow behind your thoughts, the silent witness to your life, and the only reason anything else matters at all. No one can say exactly how or why it appears, only that it does, every morning when your eyes open, like sunlight spilling across the surface of your mind. From the moment you're born, your brain begins an extraordinary journey of transformation. It starts as a whirl of raw potential, bursting with unused connections, and over the years it becomes something shaped, refined, and deeply personal, a living record of everything you have seen, felt, and learned. Time leaves its fingerprints on this organ as gently as it does on the rings of a tree. Each stage of life brings quiet changes, some subtle, some profound, yet the brain remains remarkably resilient, always finding ways to adapt and carry you forward. In early childhood, the brain is astonishingly busy. Neurons sprout connections at a staggering pace, forming trillions of synapses. This overgrowth gives young children their sponge-like ability to absorb languages, skills, and patterns almost effortlessly. As the years pass, the brain begins to prune away unused connections, refining the vast chaos of early wiring into more efficient networks. By the time adolescence arrives, the brain is still a construction site, especially in the prefrontal cortex, the region involved in planning, impulse control, and long-term thinking. It is why the teenage mind often brims with creativity and risk-taking all at once, a mix of powerful engines and untested brakes. Through your 20s and 30s, the brain settles into a balanced rhythm. Many neural pathways are well established, and the prefrontal cortex has fully matured, lending sharper judgment and steadier focus. Memory systems are strong, processing speed is quick, and new skills are often learned with relative ease. This is the brain at its energetic prime, both stable and flexible, able to navigate complex challenges while still building new connections. But time continues its quiet work. By midlife, small shifts begin to ripple through the brain. Processing speed may slow slightly, and recalling names or retrieving certain words can take longer. The hippocampus, which helps form new memories, may start to shrink bit by bit, and levels of certain neurotransmitters can decline. Yet even as some abilities dip, others deepen. The brain draws more on accumulated knowledge and experience, leaning on well-built networks to solve problems more efficiently. This is often called crystallized intelligence, the stored wisdom that comes from decades of living, and it can remain steady or even improve well into older age. One of the most remarkable discoveries about the aging brain is that it never fully stops growing. For a long time, scientists believed that adults could not produce new neurons at all, but research has shown that neurogenesis, the birth of new neurons, continues in certain regions, particularly the hippocampus, throughout life. The rate is slower than in youth, but it does not vanish. These new neurons can weave themselves into existing networks supporting memory and learning. The idea that the brain remains a living, changing organ from cradle to old age is a quietly hopeful one. Growth is never truly over. Another hidden strength is something called cognitive reserve. This refers to the brain's ability to compensate for age-related changes by recruiting alternative networks or finding more efficient pathways. People who stay mentally active, socially connected, and physically healthy tend to build more of this reserve over their lifetimes. It acts like a buffer, allowing the brain to function well even when subtle wear and tear begins. This is why some older adults can experience structural brain changes yet show little sign of cognitive decline. Their minds have built hidden detours around the obstacles. Memory does shift with age, though not in the way people often fear. Episodic memory, which stores the details of specific events, can become less sharp, and forming entirely new memories may take more effort. But semantic memory, the store of facts, meanings, and general knowledge, often remains stable or grows stronger. Older brains may take longer to retrieve a word, yet they often hold a richer vocabulary and a deeper understanding of its nuances. It is less about losing memory and more about changing which kinds shine most brightly. Even creativity can take new forms. Younger brains excel at rapid leaps and novelty, while older brains often excel at synthesis, weaving together distant ideas and seeing patterns that others might miss. This shift reflects subtle changes in the brain's networks. Connections within each hemisphere may loosen with age, but communication between the hemispheres can actually increase, allowing broader, more integrative thinking. The mind may move more slowly, but it often sees further. Emotion, too, tends to mellow. Activity in the amygdala, which processes fear and threat, often declines with age, while connections between emotional and reasoning regions strengthen. Many older adults report feeling calmer, less reactive, and more focused on meaningful experiences. This positivity effect suggests that the aging brain gradually tilts its attention toward the things that matter most, tuning out some of the noise that once demanded its energy. Physical changes do happen, of course. Brain volume shrinks slowly over the decades, especially in the prefrontal cortex and hippocampus. Myelin, the fatty insulation around nerve fibers, can thin, slowing the speed of electrical signals. Blood flow may decrease slightly, yet these changes are gradual, often unfolding so gently that their effects are softened by the brain's adaptability. The mind compensates, reroutes, and reorganizes, like a city quietly adjusting its traffic patterns as old streets wear down and new ones appear. What is striking is how much influence lifestyle has on this process. Regular physical activity boosts blood flow and growth factors in the brain, encouraging neurogenesis. Mental stimulation, reading, learning new skills, solving puzzles, strengthens existing connections and builds new ones. Social interaction helps keep emotional and cognitive networks active, while sufficient sleep supports memory consolidation and cellular repair. These habits do not stop aging, but they help the brain age more gracefully, preserving its flexibility and vitality. Perhaps the most quietly astonishing truth about the aging brain is its resilience. Even after decades of use, it does not simply fade, it changes its strategies. It leans on its vast library of experiences, recruits new regions to support old tasks, and adapts its rhythms to match new challenges. While youth is marked by speed and raw capacity, older age is marked by subtlety, a shift from sprinting to gliding, from building to weaving. There is a quiet beauty in this transformation. The young brain is like an unmarked canvas, brilliant with potential but empty. The aging brain is more like a tapestry, heavy with colour and texture, its threads crossing in intricate ways that only time could have created. It may move more slowly, but it carries a lifetime of stories in every fold. And though time leaves its marks, the brain's essence endures, its curiosity, its hunger for meaning, its ability to keep learning and adapting. It does not simply grow old, it grows wise. Long after its youthful speed has faded, the brain still hums with possibility. A reminder that even as the body ages, the mind can remain endlessly alive. For all its brilliance, the brain is also delicate, a storm of electrical pulses and chemical whispers balanced on the thinnest of margins. Most of the time it performs its duties with quiet perfection, guiding thoughts, movements and memories as naturally as breathing. But sometimes something goes wrong. A tiny clot blocks blood flow. A network of neurons begins firing in wild synchrony. A slow, hidden process starts eroding the circuits of memory. These misfires can feel like the sky cracking open in a clear mind, sudden or silent, yet always profound. One of the most dramatic examples is epilepsy, a condition where bursts of electrical activity sweep through the brain like sudden lightning storms. Neurons, which normally fire in carefully timed patterns, begin to discharge all at once, flooding the circuits with signals. This can cause seizures, brief storms of uncontrolled movement, altered sensations or loss of awareness, depending on where the electrical surge begins. Some seizures are subtle, lasting only seconds, while others are more intense, shaking the whole body as the brain's signals spin out of sync. Epileptic activity can arise from many sources: small structural changes in the brain, imbalances in neurotransmitters, or even scars from old injuries. Yet despite its suddenness, epilepsy is often manageable. Medications can calm the overactive neurons, and in some cases surgery can remove the region where the storms ignite. Many people with epilepsy live full, active lives, their brains learning to quiet the electrical chaos. It is a reminder of the brain's resilience, that even when its rhythms falter, they can often be brought gently back into harmony. Strokes are another kind of misfire, though they move with quieter urgency. A stroke happens when blood flow to part of the brain is blocked, or when a vessel bursts, cutting off oxygen and nutrients to nearby neurons. Deprived of these essentials, brain cells can begin to die within minutes. The effects depend on where the stroke strikes. Speech may falter if language areas are affected, movement may weaken if the motor cortex is struck, or vision may blur if the occipital lobe goes dark. The suddenness of a stroke is what makes it so dangerous and so vital to treat quickly. Yet even here, the brain often surprises with its ability to recover. In the weeks and months after a stroke, surviving neurons can reorganize their networks, taking over lost functions through a process called neuroplasticity. Therapy and rehabilitation can guide this rewiring, helping the brain build new paths around the damaged areas. Recovery is rarely instant, but it is often far greater than once believed possible. The brain, even wounded, keeps trying to reconnect its broken threads. Some conditions unfold far more slowly, creeping through the brain over years. Alzheimer's disease is perhaps the most well-known of these. It begins almost invisibly, as clumps of abnormal proteins accumulate between neurons and tangles of twisted fibers form inside them. Over time, these changes disrupt communication between brain cells and eventually cause them to die, especially in regions like the hippocampus that are crucial for forming new memories. Early on, the signs are often subtle, misplacing objects, forgetting recent conversations, feeling a little more disoriented than usual. Gradually, as more networks are affected, memory loss deepens, and thinking, reasoning, and language can become harder to hold on to. It is a deeply human kind of unravelling, as if the pages of a life story are being gently lifted away by the wind. Yet even in the face of such conditions, there can be resilience and moments of clarity. The brain does not lose everything at once. Older, well-established memories can linger even as newer ones fade. Music, familiar routines, and emotional connections often remain vivid far longer than expected, revealing that not all pathways dim at the same pace. And ongoing research continues to explore treatments aimed at slowing the disease, improving quality of life, and protecting the delicate networks that carry our sense of self. These conditions, epilepsy, stroke, Alzheimer's, and many others, are stark reminders that the brain is not invincible. It depends on delicate balances of blood flow, chemistry, and electrical rhythm, and even small disruptions can echo widely. But they also show how much can be done to protect and support it. Many neurological conditions respond best when detected early, when treatments can be most effective and the brain's natural plasticity is strongest. Paying attention to warning signs, sudden confusion, slurred speech, unexplained memory lapses, unusual sensations, can make a profound difference. Caring for the brain is not just about treatment, but about daily habits that quietly guard its health. Regular physical activity boosts blood flow and nourishes neurons. Adequate sleep clears waste products from the brain and helps consolidate memories. Mental stimulation, reading, learning new skills, solving puzzles, strengthens networks and builds cognitive reserve, making the brain more resilient to future challenges. A balanced diet, rich in nutrients and low in excess sugars or processed fats, helps protect the vessels that carry life to every corner of the mind. Social connection matters too. Isolation can quietly erode cognitive function, while meaningful relationships help keep emotional and cognitive circuits active. Even small interactions, a conversation, a shared laugh, a quiet moment of empathy, send ripples of activity through the brain, nourishing its intricate networks. The same organ that can sometimes misfire is also strengthened by the warmth of other minds. There is something quietly humbling about how the brain can both falter and endure. It can seize, stumble, or forget, yet it can also heal, adapt, and find new ways to carry the mind forward. Even when damaged, it often refuses to give up its delicate spark, and while some conditions cannot yet be cured, they can be eased, slowed, or softened by care. Both the care of medicine and the care of attention, patience, and love. The brain is not just a machine that sometimes breaks down. It is a living landscape, always reshaping itself in response to what it faces. When part of it misfires, the rest often leans in trying to compensate. When it is wounded, it reaches quietly toward recovery, and when it cannot fully mend, it still strives to hold on to the threads of who you are for as long as it can. In the end, the possibility of misfires makes the brain's everyday steadiness even more extraordinary. Billions of neurons fire in perfect harmony as you read, breathe, think, and feel, moment after moment, year after year. The fact that this vast symphony usually plays on flawlessly is a wonder in itself. And when it falters, it reminds us of the quiet responsibility of having a mind, to tend to it gently, protect it where we can, and marvel at how steadfastly it carries us through the fragile miracle of being alive. The human brain has always been both the tool we use to explore the world and the greatest mystery we have yet to solve. For centuries, it was a sealed black box, a soft, silent structure hidden behind bone, its workings unknowable except through the ripples they sent out as thought and behaviour. Now, though, that box is beginning to open. Piece by piece, technology is allowing us to peer inside the folds and flashes of this living organ, tracing the patterns of its activity in finer detail than ever before. It is a moment in history when the brain is, for the first time, beginning to meet itself. One of the most striking frontiers is the rise of brain-computer interfaces, or BCEs. These devices blur the line between mind and machine, reading the brain's electrical activity and translating it into action. Tiny electrodes placed on or near the brain's surface can detect the faint flickers of neurons firing, and computers can learn to decode these signals into commands. People who are paralyzed have used BCEs to move robotic arms with nothing but thought, guiding them to reach, grasp, and lift as naturally as if their own limbs had awoken again. These systems work by finding patterns, learning which neural signals correspond to particular movements, then translating those patterns back into motion. At first, this takes practice, like learning a new language. But over time, the brain adapts, reshaping its activity to control the device more fluidly. It is as if the brain is extending its map of the body to include something entirely new, treating a machine as part of itself. Researchers are also exploring how BCAs might one day restore lost senses. Experimental implants have allowed people who are blind to perceive spots of light by directly stimulating the visual cortex, and work is underway on devices that could send sound directly to the auditory cortex for those who are profoundly deaf. These are early steps, small sparks of perception, but they hint at a future where damaged sensory pathways could be bypassed entirely, letting the brain receive information in new ways. Alongside these interfaces is the vast project of neural mapping, the attempt to chart the brain's connections down to their finest threads. The human brain contains around 86 billion neurons, linked by hundreds of trillions of synapses. Mapping them all would be like charting every star and every beam of starlight in a galaxy. Yet researchers are beginning to make progress, using advanced microscopes, fluorescent tracers, and powerful algorithms to trace tiny neural pathways through slices of brain tissue. This effort is sometimes called the connectome, a complete map of all the brain's wiring. Even a cubic millimeter of cortex contains thousands of neurons and millions of synapses, each forming a piece of the brain's intricate circuitry. By tracing these patterns, scientists hope to understand how information flows through the brain's networks, how memories form, how decisions emerge, and how diseases disrupt the system. The scale of this task is staggering, but so is its potential. Understanding the brain's wiring at this level could transform medicine, revealing how to repair circuits damaged by injury or disease. It could show how to enhance learning, preserve memory, or gently guide the brain's natural plasticity to heal itself. It would also offer something more subtle, a glimpse of the physical structure behind our thoughts, a map of the pathways where our lives silently unfold. Artificial intelligence is becoming a crucial ally in this quest. The sheer volume of data from brain scans, neural tracings, and electrical recordings is far beyond what human minds could analyze alone. Eye systems can sift through this ocean of information, spotting patterns that would otherwise stay hidden, clusters of activity that link to certain emotions, circuits that spark during decision-making, rhythms that predict when a memory will stick. In a curious twist, AI is also being shaped by what we learn about the brain. Many modern AI networks are inspired by neural networks, echoing the way neurons send signals and adjust their connections with use. The relationship has become a loop. We build AI from the brain's patterns, and then use AI to decode those patterns, as if the brain is training a mirror version of itself to help solve its own puzzle. Yet even as our tools grow sharper, the core mystery remains. We can trace electrical signals and watch networks light up, but that does not fully explain how the quiet glow of experience emerges, why certain patterns of activity feel like something. We can see the physical motion of thought, but the subjective world it creates still shimmers just beyond reach. No scan or algorithm has yet captured the soft essence of awareness, the simple yet astonishing feeling of being. This lingering mystery is not a failure. It is part of what makes the journey so compelling. The more we learn about the brain, the more it reveals new layers of complexity, like a fractal that keeps unfolding. Each answer opens further questions, and each glimpse of understanding only deepens the wonder. The brain is not a static machine waiting to be solved. It is a living universe, changing as we watch it, reshaping itself even as we try to chart its shape. The future of understanding the brain may bring astonishing breakthroughs, seamless interfaces, cures for once untreatable conditions, even ways to enhance memory or creativity. But it will likely also bring something quieter, a deeper appreciation for the strangeness and fragility of the mind. Knowing more about the brain will not make it less mysterious. If anything, it may make its mystery feel even larger, like standing on a mountain and realizing how vast the horizon truly is. And perhaps that is fitting. After all, this quest is unlike any other in science. It is not just the universe trying to understand itself, or life trying to understand its origins. It is the brain, the very thing that creates understanding, turning inward, trying to comprehend its own nature. It is a loop of thought reflecting on thought, a spark of awareness gazing into the darkness from which it rose. Somewhere inside your skull, billions of neurons hum with electricity, and from their silent pulses comes everything you know, everything you remember, and everything you are. They're trying, in their quiet way, to understand themselves, a constellation of cells dreaming of the shape of their own light. From the smallest flicker of an electrical signal to the vast glow of awareness, the brain carries you through the entirety of your life. It begins as a cluster of cells, barely organized, and gradually becomes a labyrinth of delicate networks. Neurons branching and intertwining like ancient trees, glia weaving between them to nurture and support. From these quiet biological whispers arises everything you know, everything you love, every thought that has ever passed through your mind. It is easy to take it for granted, this silent companion that never rests, yet it is the most intricate structure known in the universe. We have wandered through its many realms, its architecture and rhythms, its senses and dreams, its emotions and memories, its creativity and curiosity. Each part revealed something astonishing, not just in its function, but in how effortlessly it weaves itself into the whole. There are no sharp boundaries inside the brain. Its systems blend and overlap, constantly exchanging signals, reshaping their connections and rebalancing their activity. It is never truly still. Even when you are asleep, even when you are lost in silence, it is humming softly in the background, holding you together. There is something humbling in that. Your brain has been working since long before you could speak or walk, long before you even knew you had a self. It kept your heart beating in the dark of the womb. It built your sense of the world piece by piece, shaping patterns from fragments of sight, sound, and touch. It learned to recognize faces, to decode language, to conjure memories from the faint traces of experience. And as you grew, it kept adapting, pruning what you no longer needed, strengthening what you used most, bending itself like light around the shape of your life. And yet, for all its complexity, it is silent. There are no lights inside your skull, no voices echoing through its folds, no pictures hidden in its cells, only signals, rising and fading, like waves on a dark sea. Somehow from this quiet ocean of electrical whispers emerges the feeling of being, the warm presence of consciousness that turns raw sensation into experience. Out of chemistry comes colour, out of motion comes meaning. It is an everyday miracle so familiar that it can be hard to notice at all. Even now, after centuries of study, we have only brushed the surface of how it happens. We can trace the outlines of neural pathways, map the ripples of brainwaves, and watch networks spark to life as thoughts form. But the experience itself, the simple glow of awareness, remains beyond full explanation. It is as if the brain is both the instrument and the music, and we can see the strings vibrating but not quite capture the song. And perhaps that is part of its beauty. The brain does not need to be fully understood to be wondrous. It has carried you through every moment of your life with unassuming grace, keeping you breathing while you dream, holding your memories while you wander, and quietly reshaping itself each time you learn or love or change. It is the keeper of your past, the engine of your present, and the architect of every possible future you can imagine. All of it, your thoughts, your emotions, your creativity, your sense of self, arises from something small enough to rest in your hands, yet intricate enough to contain galaxies of meaning. 86 billion neurons, each one flickering with possibility, each one part of a living network that somehow gives rise to you. So as this journey comes to an end, take a moment to marvel at the quiet brilliance within you. The brain is not just an organ. It is the stage on which your entire life unfolds, the silent storyteller behind your every moment, the soft glow that lets you experience the world at all. Thank you for spending this time exploring it, for letting your own mind wander through the delicate architecture of itself. It has been a gentle kind of journey, not loud or hurried, but slow and curious, the way the brain itself often works best. Now, as your thoughts grow slower and the day falls quiet, you might let your own brain slip back into its softer rhythms. Let it rest, reorganize, and dream its secret dreams. It has carried you so far, it has done so much. Close your eyes, breathe deeply, and let it be still for a while. Good night.